Hey everybody, welcome to episode 31 of the Go Get Outside podcast. This is your host, Jason Milligan. Back at the beginning of this season, I promised all of you that we would have roundtable discussion episodes. Well, here we are today, where I make good on that promise. This episode will be our very first roundtable discussion. We will be talking about solo backpacking. This is an episode requested by listener Stephen Abbott. So thanks for sending us that email and making that request. So this episode is specifically tailored towards solo backpacking, but there's a lot of information here for general backpacking as well. So who is on today's show? Well, we brought back 3 people from previous episodes that if you've listened to them, I'm sure you have enjoyed. We have Shawnte Salibert from episode 27, Pamela Zulalian from way back in episode 13, and everybody's favorite ex-Scientologist, Alden Anderson from episode 16. Back in January of this year, the 4 of us got together on the Sam Merrill Trail in the quote-unquote haunted forest up in Altadena. We sat down on the edge of the trail at night, sipped some cocoa, sipped some tea, ate a few snacks, sat on some decorative blankets, and talked all about solo backpacking. This is a particularly long episode, so if you have in the past, Scott Merrill, told me that the episodes are too short, don't worry, we will be topping 2 hours today. Let's get over to the alleged haunted forest and talk about solo backpacking.
My name is Pamela, and I am here with this awesome crew, and we're going to talk about solo backpacking and thru-hiking because it's something you guys should all do.
And you have done it.
And I've done it. I swear.
She's lying. My name is Shawnte, and I am the senior writer over at Modern Hiker, and I am writing a guidebook to the Southern California, part of the Central California sections of the Pacific Crest Trail, and I think I've backpacked like a third of this year. Many times solo. Lots of alone time in the woods.
That's great, yeah. Awesome. I'm Alden. Done a couple solo backpacking trips. The JMT, which I believe you've done, right?
I did. I've done the JMT.
So, yeah, so I was listening to your podcast and a couple other trips.
Hold on, let me see if I can get your mic higher.
He's trying to
Maybe
edit,
you could just get
he's trying to edit
higher.
you out already.
Yeah.
So should I do my intro again?
No, I mean, we could hear it. Everybody
And I
else
feel my
everybody
intro
else
was
sounds
really
good,
bad,
and you sound like
actually.
you're
Yeah,
far
so do
away.
I.
I didn't like him. Shawnte was like, hey, by the way, I'm senior writer at Modern Hiker, and I'm writing a book, and I'm
Tell
like,
people why they have to trust you, Pamela.
I know, I'm sorry.
So are you wanting an opportunity to do it again?
Yes, she does.
Maybe.
Because I will let you since you
I want
brought
her to
hot water
shine
and hot
like
cocoa.
the star she is.
Yeah, so you can introduce yourself again if you want.
Hello,
to.
my name is Pamela, and I actually have 20 years of hiking and backpacking experience. I've thru-hiked the John Muir Trail. I've done actually quite a bit of stuff, and I think we have a great roundtable group here that's going to, really get you guys going on the right step.
Yeah.
Nice, the right step. I like it.
Are you happy with your
Literally.
introduction, Alden, or did you want to go again?
Hi, I'm Alden.
Welcome to Deep Jazz.
No.
And I also write for Modern Hiker, but I'm not a senior writer yet. I'm working my way up the totem pole.
Well, yeah, so I write for 360nomad.org.
And I write for theadventureherd.com.
I feel like I should say more.
So the reason that we're doing
And I write for...
I wanted to have the last word.
You're like, damn it.
I write for my Instagram page.
I write tweets all day long.
So the inspiration for this was someone who listens to the podcast, because there are actually people who I don't know.
What?
Which is a shock to me. And they listen, and sometimes they email me, and someone emailed me, and he said, hey, I've been listening to a lot of episodes, and you have episodes about this and episodes about this. I'd love to hear more about solo backpacking. So I emailed him and said, what do you want to know? and then he told me a bunch of things, so that's what we're going to talk about.
I love
Perfect.
It.
I love it.
Okay, that's
Answer
cool.
some
I did not know
awesome
that.
I hope these questions are good.
I hope there's at
We'll
least
see.
one bear question.
Oh, the bear questions are the best.
So great. I have so many bear
I have so many
answers.
bear stories.
So there aren't, but we're going to talk about it.
Oh, we're going
That's
to talk about it.
I'm sure we've all had bear.
Oh, yeah.
encounters,
Oh, yeah. Mountain lions. Tell you about a
bear.
mountain lion encounter.
We obviously don't have to explain what solo backpacking is, I would think. I think everybody can pretty much figure out by the 2 words in the description what it is. So let's talk about why, because each of you have
sometimes
gone.
backpacking can be confused, you're taking a trip across Europe. I'm backpacking across.
good.
Oh,
point.
okay. So then good.
point.
Alden Anderson, just define solo backpacking for everyone at home.
Okay, well, let's not go that far.
Nope. Go for it.
So you're going out into the wilderness by yourself with everything you need to survive for, one night up to 30 nights, months is with you on your back. Your food, your stove, your shelter, and, all the clothing and everything that you need.
And because it's solo, you're by yourself.
Oh,
Dun.
yes, you're by yourself.
Yeah, like we wouldn't want to be by ourselves right now in the haunted forest.
No, you wouldn't.
Kill. So most people go backpacking with other people because humans are social animals, as Alden Anderson has said before in another podcast episode.
Yep.
And a lot of people would say you shouldn't go solo because it's dangerous, but all of you have, on multiple occasions, gone solo. So
For better or worse.
do you want to talk about why you made that decision to go solo?
For me, I made the decision to do the John Muir Trail solo specifically because all of my wonderful friends that kept saying they were going to join me kept bailing out. And I decided, damn you people, I'm going to go and do this. And I know I could do this by myself. I had actually not done a solo trip before other than a couple nights. And it was the best choice I had ever made. It was just the most remarkable experience. So it's something I would suggest everybody try.
And I guess for people who maybe don't know what the John Muir Trail is, it's like 216 miles, give or take?
It's give or take, yeah.
And about a month of time. Mm-hmm. So if people are thinking like, oh, she couldn't wait, none of her friends would go for 2 days with her somewhere. I mean, it's a big commitment. It's 30-ish
it's
days.
30-ish days. It's a very, very long committed hike.
Logistics and everything.
Yeah, logistics
stuff,
and
resupplies.
Yeah, resupplies, exactly.
Oh, yeah.
And then after you did that, because that was the first time you said, you've gone solo again since, right? And other trips, other ventures?
I have done other adventures solo, but they haven't been that long yet. I just think once you get the bug and once you realize that you can really go out and do something that, you kind of fight your own belief in yourself in a way. I mean, because, when I was doing my preparation, I was like, I can absolutely do this. But I was so blown away and so surprised how many people were telling me that I shouldn't do this. And a lot of them were women. And I was really blown away. Like, you're a woman and why you shouldn't be doing this by yourself. And I'm thinking, why shouldn't I be doing this by myself?
There's a lot of fear-based opinions out there, I think, and I will say, and you may tell us differently, but I think a lot of the women I know that have gone solo backpacking get this especially hard. And then if you tell them, no, I'm going, and then it switches over to, are you carrying a gun? Are you going to take mace? Self-defense? Are you into jiu-jitsu? No. But yeah,
it's true, though.
It's true.
It's so crazy.
But
it's so
it's
true.
based on other people's fears of, why would you do that? What's, all the things that could happen to you just flood into their head at once, I think.
But I think that goes a lot into preparation, too. I mean, for me, I read everything that could go wrong. Mm-hmm. So I was prepared in case it did go wrong. At least I knew, like, okay, well, I know about lightning. I know about bears. I know about inclement weather. I know about, just everything, like really, really heavy water flow. If I had a river crossing, I read the right thing to do in every situation. So at least if something did happen, it wasn't something new.
Well, I think the thing that's interesting is like you're all saying how people are telling you that's too dangerous, you shouldn't do it, especially if you're a girl. All of the dangers that they were imagining were probably not the dangers you actually had to face. They're worried about people trying to kill you on the trip. Oh, were they? Okay.
No, although some people did ask me about people trying to kill me.
Right, a lot of times people worry
about
there
you are.
Right.
If someone's going to spend like 9 days hiking into where I am just to kill me, maybe they deserve it, I guess.
Exactly.
That's their
as
prize.
they stab you in the chest,
Yes,
you say, well,
right.
you earned it. I understand.
Fine, go for it.
So let's go to you now, Shawnte. Why would
What's
you
wrong
do
with
such
you?
a dangerous, crazy thing?
crazy person, you loner. There's a couple reasons. One reason as of late, so I'm working on this book, a trail guide, and what I realize is that there's certain people, like Pamela's done a big chunk of the PCT with me, and she's one of my favorite people to hike with.
Oh, thank you.
But a lot of people...
That's not what she told us before you got here.
I know. She's like, oh, God, here she is.
What I
Play
really
nice.
She said, I told you not to invite her.
I'm bearing with it.
Oh, thank you again.
One of my horribly favorite people. But what happens when you're writing a trail guide is that sometimes you talk into a voice recorder and it sounds like you're talking to yourself, and sometimes you walk fast, sometimes you walk slow, sometimes, and I really...
So people thought you were crazy and they wouldn't hike with you, is what you're telling us.
Basically. You know, for me, I realized that I was often not paying attention to everything around me because I was trying to make sure my friends were having a good time and making sure they were comfortable. And I'm like, all right, I got to get some shiz done while I'm out here. And then I just kind of have fallen in love with it. And so I mostly solo backpack in the Sierra. And I think for me, it's because going outside is very meditative sometimes. Like it's a form of walking meditation, backpacking. When I'm doing it, usually when I'm doing it by myself, sometimes with other people, like Pamela and I have we get in the zone.
We're in the perfect zone. Like, you're my favorite person to backpack with, seriously.
I love you.
No one else knows this, though.
Keep it secret.
Keep it secret.
We can hold for a moment if you need a hug.
Hug it out, girl.
Can I get a hug too, Jason?
Absolutely.
I am hugging you right now. You don't feel my hand?
But yeah, I think that there's different ways to experience the outdoors, and I love going outdoors with other people and just having an awesome time. And then there's times where I just want to feel the wonder and the awe and have all this stuff come tumbling into my head that wants to tumble in there, and sometimes just feel the silence. So solo backpacking is totally the jam when you want those kind of experiences, at least for me. And then I could just do what I want to do all the time. I don't have to ask somebody else if they want to walk to that river, if they want to go over that pass, if they want to walk 20 miles.
That is definitely the bonus. Like when you have days where you feel really strong,
absolutely.
You can keep going and do a 20-mile day. When you have days where you're a little more tired and, you come across this incredible vista and you're like, this is where I'm going to camp tonight. And it's been only 6 miles. Like, you can do that. Yeah. You don't have to lift anyone up. Like, I've heard experiences where, there was like a stronger person and a weaker person, and the stronger person's always having to lift up that weaker person. So all you have to worry about is lifting up yourself. And actually, that's not that hard. I'm sure you guys have that experience where you're having a really, really challenging day, and all of a sudden you see something that you never thought you would see, or you smell something, or you take a moment and you look and you're in this total awe-inspiring moment where, like everything that you were feeling or those doubts or that struggle just sort of just dissipates. It goes away because you realize that you're someplace that most people will never, ever be. And, for me, that is like a huge push to, really drive myself to want to do those long miles and take the time and do solo stuff and, as well as stuff with friends and, take people out on the trail for the first time or, go out with other seasoned hikers as well or backpackers.
Seasoned. She means old.
Oh, no.
Or she could mean they smell bad.
Yes, exactly.
Special hiker seasoning. Special BO seasoning. Tasty.
Which, if we're talking about backpacking, everyone smells bad. So
everyone is specially seasoned.
If you meet someone who doesn't smell bad, they weren't really backpacking.
I did meet a guy this summer whose trail name was Mr. Clean, and he was not just clean shaven, but like impeccably head to toe. And I seriously doubted that he actually stepped one foot on the trail, because every time I saw him, it was like a resupply point. Like, are you just getting shuttled to all the resupply points? I don't get it. Because I was rank. My shirt actually, at the end of by a week into the trail, because I wore the same clothes every day. You don't want to carry anything you don't need to. And I remember at the end of the first week, my shirt would stand on its own at the back of my tent.
Oh, wow.
I was like, yes, achievement unlocked.
What?
See, I would boil my clothes at the end of the night and literally wash them, hang them dry. So
really?
So they
You would boil them?
Yeah, I would
Fancier than
I'd
me.
cook them in like hot water. Like, I'd give myself a full bath with hot water at the end of every hiking day, and I'd change into my sleeps, what I was going to sleep in, and then I would literally wash my clothes. Like, I'd boil them in hot water, clean my socks, and all of that, and then usually they'd be clean.
I don't know if this is leave no trace ethics.
No, it is. It totally is. So my clothes were not standalone entirely.
Oh, mine were. I got to Muir Trail Ranch, and that was a couple weeks into this summer's big jaunt, and I just needed something to mask my own scent, and I found the toiletries bucket, and the only thing in there that smelled like something was Old Spice. I was like,
You're like rubbing it on you.
I put it on my shirt. I smelled like Old Spice for a week. I was like, yeah.
That's awesome.
Getting off topic here.
Anyway,
I mean,
Alden.
any time a woman can talk about wearing Old Spice, I think it's worth the
It's
tangent.
sexy.
Guys, I'm single.
Guys, I smell terrible, and I wear men's cologne.
Wow.
I think I could probably answer for Alden. Alden, you go by yourself because you don't have any friends, right?
Yeah. Well, actually, so that's partially true. The first time I did a solo trip, it was when I kind of just discovered backpacking, and I just went out by myself. And I think I told this whole story back in the podcast, so I'm not going to retell everything. But I just kind of went out. I didn't have much experience, and just kind of went out. Didn't really even consider getting somebody because I didn't have anybody that would go with me. I just didn't even, there was just none of my friends would go. So I kind of just, that mentality, I would just kind of go up by myself. That's kind of why I started. But then, I mean, like you guys have touched on, when you're out there by yourself, there's, you notice a lot more things. You're not talking to somebody. I mean, you do also have these random encounters with people on the trail.
Yeah.
And that's super awesome.
Which are
And
the
you-
best encounters ever.
Yes.
And you talk to them more maybe because you don't have somebody right there. And you're like almost starving for like a connection, I've felt.
But I also found that, the people that I did cross paths with, like they took more time, even in those 3 to 5 minutes, to talk to me in a really deep way and a very connected way. More so than, in the city with neighbors, with people I know. Everyone's always in a hurry and always in a rush. And
Absolutely.
I think, that's one thing that's so beautiful about being on the trail.
Yeah,
it's
I
like,
love that.
it's someone you may never ever see again, but you're going to have a conversation that's going to stick with you for a very, very long time.
Here's a point. So when you do meet people on a trail and you're talking to them, it's the one time in your life where you talk about the weather and it's pertinent to the conversation.
Yes, it's so true.
Nice.
It's so true. And the water. How's the water up ahead?
Yeah,
Yes,
yeah.
and you have no problem talking about poop.
Yes, and poop.
It's
Exactly.
the one time in your life you'll talk about poop with strangers.
29 cat holes.
I feel like on the
Wait, were you counting them on the John Muir Trail? Is that what you're
I
telling us?
did. I counted my
that's how
cat
many you
holes.
made?
Do you have photographs?
I do. I do. I have
No way.
photographs.
Did you plant a little flag with a number on
No,
each?
I didn't do that,
Leave no
but I
trace.
definitely did. Yes, leave no trace, absolutely.
Wow.
But I
this is
do
hardcore.
give JMT talks. I've done, quite a few with different REIs and whatnot, and I do talk about 29 cat holes. I talk about all
That's
the numbers of
hilarious. Is that-
things.
is that
You
like
should
your
write a
byline
book.
for-
Yeah, you should write a book called 29 Cat Holes.
I just
that
might. I just might.
I'm going to expect royalties.
All right, I will make a note of that.
Can I just say I dug the best cat hole of my life last week?
Oh, awesome.
Best view, best cat hole. Everything worked perfectly in sync. I just want to tell you guys that, and all of you listening at home.
Do you have a photograph of that? Maybe we'd send them to an Instagram picture.
It's a mental
or a
photograph.
how-to on Modern Hiker.
Yeah, that'll be next.
So are you done telling your why story, or do you still need more time?
Well, I was gonna say before I was rudely interrupted by Butcher Bird's own. No, I feel like everyone on the trail is equal.
Yes.
I ran into like doctors, lawyers, and we're all just people.
Mm-hmm.
You're not defined by some
Until you break a
societal-
leg. And then the doctors are more important than you.
than the lawyers. But I felt like, we're all people and we're all going through the same experience. And then you connect with people a lot more. And I thought that was a pretty cool thing.
Because you're not distracted by all of this technology. So
Yeah.
you're just like, hey, here you are. And you're, having just such a deep connection with people.
Yeah, I mean, there's
Yeah.
something about being out there. You're just stripped to your elements. I mean, you're
Yeah,
wearing...
exactly. That's exactly it.
It's you've got like the least amount of things possible on your back that will get you through, maybe with a few luxuries. But, and especially if you've been out there for whether it's a few days or a few weeks, whatever, everything else falls away. And I think that's one of the most amazing experiences. You can have that experience with another person that you're hiking with, but there's something more powerful about having that experience yourself and then running into people. And I feel like I've been a little more open to the people I meet on the trail because, when I'm solo, you are sort of just, you're who you are. You're like your core self.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's interesting.
Yeah.
So one of the things you've all kind of talked about is because you're by yourself, you don't have another person that you have to worry about propping up or getting through it and all. But then there's also a flip side to that. You don't have anyone there to do that for you. You don't have somebody to talk. I know for me, when I'm hiking with other people, I hike faster if I'm talking. If I'm hiking alone, I tend to hike slower. And then you can focus on when you're at a slog.
Yeah.
Whereas if you're talking to somebody, maybe you don't focus on that because you're distracted by conversations about whatever you're talking about. So do you find that to be a challenge not having another person there to help you through it or help talk you through things, or just on days where it's miserable, it's strictly up to you then to make yourself feel better.
But I think that's part of what makes through hiking so rewarding, is that you have to rely on yourself. There's no one else there. You can't throw a tantrum and stop because you're in the middle of nowhere and you have, like you have to get yourself through that. So I think that's, where your strength, you build strength within yourself. Like you discover things about yourself that you maybe weren't as in tune with. I know for me, there were days where, you are exhausted. You're much more tired. You weren't expecting certain passes to be as rigorous as they were, or, weather was really bad and you're kind of fighting a storm to try to get over a pass to get someplace you need to be. Looking back, it's like, yeah, those were some pretty challenging moments, but to just say, wow, I did this and I didn't give up and all I had was myself. And I think it really, you find something within you when you do that just kicks it into gear, because you can't fail. Like there's no option. Like you have to proceed forward. Like you have to keep going. And, I think a lot of people would learn a lot about themselves if they actually, put themselves in a situation where they had to, really push themselves to their absolute, the end of everything to get where they're going.
I agree. I think people break when they don't think they would, and excel where they think they would break.
Absolutely.
Oh, for sure.
Absolutely.
Yeah, there were definitely times, I can think back even to the summer where I would get somewhere and I would feel like I bonked. You have no energy, you're over it. There were times where I yelled at the weather. We had 10 days of gnarly thunderstorms, just crazy all hours of the day. And then somehow things would shift back into perspective. I'd turn a corner on like switchback 1002 and and I would suddenly, like a little shaft of sunlight would sparkle on the granite or something like that, and I would smile. Inevitably, every single day on the trail by myself, I will end with a smile.
Which is so true. I would say that was a lot of what got me through my hardest moments, is just stopping for a second to look and see. And, whether
present.
it was like the wind, causing the leaves of a tree to kind of applaud that you've arrived at this moment,
right,
and, or, just whatever it was, the sound of a waterfall that you didn't hear until you crest a turn, or, whatever it is, there was always something in my hardest moments that made it just the best moment as well.
Yeah. It just, that feeling of helicopters flying overhead is amazing. I felt like I was much more present a lot of times when I had those moments. And what's great is that now when I'm doing other hikes, like this past weekend, I did 4 days in the Scotty Mountains, or I should say 2 weekends ago, 4 days in the Scotty Mountains on the PCT, and notoriously like the hottest, driest section of the PCT. And right now it's just slathered in snow. It's gorgeous.
Where is that?
They're south of Walker Pass. So, pretty excellent. Yeah, Southern Sierra, Sequoia National Forest, kind of, north of Mojave. There was a section with, I don't know, it was probably 1,600 foot gain. And, what's funny is that I was with other people on this trip, and they were all like, oh man, I don't want to go up that. And I'm like, psh, it's nothing. Because I was totally thinking back to those feelings I had when I was going up Glen Pass or Forester Pass or Mather Pass or whatever. And I'm like, oh, you got this, girl. You know how to do this. You got it in you. Just go.
So what about you, Alden? Do you find that not having another person there with you, does it hinder you in any way? Like, are there times where you're like, shit, I wish there was somebody here to make me want to do this harder or to talk to? Or
by and large, I don't know. I kind of like, pondering stuff on my own, and then the connections that you do have with people are, I think, more like that you meet and spend the night with in the same camp. There was one time where when I was in Newfoundland, that's when I was stuck in this snowstorm. Again, I mentioned this in the podcast.
Yeah, it sounded really epic and just memories.
Yeah.
That's episode 16. For those who are wondering, if you go back and listen to episode 16, you can hear about him trying to talk to foxes because he was so lonely and bored in the snow.
So there was
rereading the same paragraph over and over again of
yes,
your book.
Yes, of
because you wanted the book to
Walk
last.
in the Woods.
Walk in the Woods.
So entertaining. And
awesome.
And I also had Walden, which is a lot deeper.
Yeah.
And
a guy on a pond.
Right. And anyway, they seemed like two very appropriate things to read, but I would have given anything to have a person there. And I was stuck in a tent for 5 days, just in the tent. So to have a person, that would have been pretty amazing. Actually,
Although it could have been a person that you just argue with the whole time. I guess it could go both ways,
Do you bring
right?
a journal or anything, or like a little mini deck of cards for at least solitaire? I won my
he
first
had
game of
2
solitaire
books.
on the trail. I was so excited. I took a picture of it. I was like, oh my God, I never win this game.
never
won
played
solitaire?
solitaire.
No, that was the first time I won.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
If you bring a Rubik's Cube, you'll never run out of things to do.
I've never played solitaire, so
What? People, get with it.
yeah.
Not even on a computer?
No,
No, especially not on
I
a
don't even know
computer.
how
That
to
would
say
be
how to
horrible.
play. So there's this one phenomenon that I've noticed, and I don't know if you guys have noticed this. When you're by yourself, blowing wind or like babbling brooks sometimes sound like voices or like people.
Yes.
And I thought that was very interesting. I think because my brain like craved people for being alone, but it was in this trying circumstance where I wish somebody was there. It's not just I'm backpacking for 5 days by
Yeah,
myself.
well, you were
It's
stuck
like,
in your
Right, it
tent
was
for
yeah, and
almost a week
the
with-
wind and
yeah,
snow was like
snow and-
compressing my tent and
Right.
collapsing it. So I was a little on edge, and that was kind of an interesting thing. You thinking there's people outside, and I would like look out and be like, what? Is that a search party? Still snowing. A moose like looks over at me.
You're like, no, it's just the moose speaking to me.
Yeah.
That would have probably been pretty nice if the moose would have turned to you and be like, "What are you doing?"
I know, seriously, that
You're like,
full-
"What is happening to me?"
You're like, no one's gonna believe this. They're gonna think I was insane.
I'm actually,
pure whiteout moment.
I'm actually reading this book right now, and it's funny you should have brought that up because I just started. Well, I'm halfway through it already. 'Cause
Is it 29 cat holes?
that's my next book. Can't wait till Pamela writes it. It's going to be amazing. It's called The Secret Knowledge of Water by Craig Childs, and I am just over the moon. So I'm a big fan of Edward Abbey. I love any kind of desert writing, and this is my new favorite desert book. But he talks. He goes out in search of water in the far, deep reaches of the American desert, and he talks about that phenomenon of being out there by yourself and starting to hear, he talks specifically about the water talking to him and then realizing it's not people, it's just the water.
Yeah.
And
As
then
we
he's like,
sit in
maybe
the
I should
haunted
listen anyway.
forest.
Yeah. listen
So
to
is,
the trees, guys.
is that why it's like babbling brook?
Yeah, I
Oh,
wonder,
maybe so,
right?
yeah.
There was some explorer yonder times ago who went slowly insane.
This actually segues nicely into one of our other talking points that I have here on my phone.
Buzzkill.
And you're already kind of talking about it, which is coping with loneliness and with fear. So
I can
let's talk
fear.
about what fears you had going into, say, your first solo, and then the fears you maybe weren't aware you were going to experience until you got there.
I just wrote
And then
about
how you
this.
cope with those things.
Oh yeah, I just wrote like a little personal essay on my website about this, and it actually got I posted it on a couple of Facebook groups, and it got probably the best response of anything I've ever written on my website. And I think it's because fear is universal. Before I went into doing a big chunk of the PCT by myself, I feared bears, I feared mountain lions, I feared falling into a raging river and drowning, I feared sliding off of a snowy slope and dying, and lightning storms. And the thing that ended up being what the real fear was being alone. And then, of course, I ended up loving it. So, but yeah, that was the funny thing is I was afraid of all these external things. And then it turns out that the root of all that was really internal. So once I learned to acknowledge that, kind of deal with it and sort of become friends with it, I was like, you know what? It's not so bad. It's okay to have these fears. And, because all the other stuff was logic. Logic tells me I know how to deal with bears.
Yeah.
And I did have to deal.
Part of my dealing with that fear was sort of doing the research on all of that stuff. So I
Right.
walked into it I don't want to say fearless, but aware.
Yeah.
So my fears weren't as great because I was like, okay, let me knock this down. What do I do in this situation? How do I cross a raging river?
Right.
What do I do in the bear situation? So, my fears were a little bit different. My fear wasn't even to be by myself. I think my fear was just kind of that unexpected. So I really tried to tackle all of those questions that were asked to me. Well, what are you going to do in this situation? What are you going to do in that situation? And I tried to answer those before I even got there. So it was really surprising. I think my scariest thing was actually lightning. Like that has always just been a huge fear of mine is lightning, because you can be 20 miles away from a storm, standing on a beautiful summit. There's not a storm in sight.
Sure.
It's way off, and you could get struck. So when there's lightning snapping the ground around you, and you can hear rocks crumbling around you, that was definitely something that I was just like, okay, buck up, you know, like you're going to get through this. So I think the lightning was probably my biggest fear that, you know, I definitely had to just, you know, manage.
Yeah. Well, it was funny because all of my fears came true on my trip. I had lightning the very first day, and then for a million days afterwards, I had a solo bear encounter. I had a solo mountain lion encounter. There were some crazy river crossings, you know, the whole 9 yards. And it's funny because in the end, you know, like I said, what I came away with it was, you know, all of those fears I could manage because I knew what to do. Like you said, I actually, you know, I'm like, I know this stuff. I teach people this stuff. Like, I get it. The hardest fear of all to manage was that, like, oh, what's it going to be like to be alone with me, my thoughts, and all the stuff that comes bubbling up. And like I said, you know, it ended up being amazing, but, you know, that's interesting. Yeah, lightning.
So what you're saying is you better like yourself before you go out, or you're going to have a terrible time.
Or be open to liking yourself. Be open to growth and change.
Because, you know, I went on the trail and I was at my best. My challenges weren't like, you know, bizarre internal dialogues or where I was struggling through anything. So it was just all around like the most positive experience. But I did meet a few people on the trail that were, you know, sort of kind of running away from something or having a huge life change or transition, and they were trying to find their answer on the trail. And, you know, one girl in particular, I was just, you know, in my mind, I thought, why are you here? Because she was just like, I'm waiting to have my epiphany. Like she was just, you know, looking for the woods to sort of call out to her and give her this answer. And I felt really badly because I don't think she ever found that. You know, you could tell she wasn't having a good time. You could tell that she was struggling the entire way. She just kept moving forward, but was just miserable. And I was just like, God, I want you to have such a good time, and I want you to just step back, and I want you to just forget everything that you're, you know, all this dialogue that you're giving yourself. And those moments and that epiphany will happen if you just sort of let it go and try to be absolutely present and don't look for stuff. And
you're trying too hard.
Yeah, she was trying. Yeah. She was struggling. She was trying so hard to like have this experience.
Right, like assign meaning to it.
Yeah,
you know, gotta let it just happen. You
know?
That stuff happens organically, and it almost always does. Like when you just let the hike take its natural course.
Yeah.
It almost sounds like when people are looking for a lover. And they're like, I need a boyfriend or I need a girlfriend, and they never can find them until they stop. And everybody's like, oh, wow, as soon as the person stopped looking, she found a man. Or
exactly.
As soon as he stopped worrying about it, he met a girlfriend. Or Alden Anderson, do you experience fear, or are you too manly for it?
I would say that the most fear I've had doing a solo backpacking trip was on the trip I did in Newfoundland, where this storm hit and the winds were clocked like above 90 miles per hour. And that was below the plateau where I was on, and apparently they were usually higher up there. I was the only one up there for miles. This is a really, really wild place, and there's no like established hiking trails. You have to like take a map and compass, so it's all like nav and everything. So when that storm hit that night, I was honestly afraid of dying. I thought I might not make it through the night because just the intensity of the rain, and it turned to ice, and just my tent collapsed twice. And
did you feel prepared in that situation though? Like, did you feel that you had everything you needed, even though you were, you know, afraid of dying?
Yeah. I mean, I definitely had food and stuff. I was afraid of being exposed to the elements, that the wind, because I'd never experienced wind like that. And when you're in a tent and it's windy,
right. Yeah.
Like my tent usually is, 3 feet above my head. It was on my face. Like I thought this thing's gonna just be like destroyed. I'm gonna get soaked and I'm gonna get hypothermia. Yeah. That was my fear. Like, and then I might not make it because of that.
Yeah.
It's just like this bizarre feeling. It felt like somebody was like pushing my tent in.
You're
like some weird force.
You're like,
yeah.
Come on, abominable snowman, work with me.
It was that same moose that asked you why you were there. If you'd unzip the tent, he'd be like, hey, guys,
he's like, come on, man, talk to me. I'm pushing on your face.
So that like definitely brought on some emotions and made me, miss friends and think about my life. And, it wasn't like some people have had like near-death experiences. I don't know that it was that, but I definitely thought like there's a chance this could be it.
Was there a turning point where you went from thinking about I'm going to die to thinking about other things that kind of flipped where you were to make it so you were stronger and, just were able to, like, how did,
Well, I think...
you have me curious.
Yeah.
What he didn't tell you is he died and he resurrected.
Awesome. He's the ghost in the
woods. So, I mean, one of the things that snapped me out of it is my tent collapsing, and I had to like get out of my sleeping bag so fast, throw on my gear, and that like adrenaline kicks in, and you're just like you deal with the situation. And then that happened again, so I fixed it. I mean, I don't know. It's just you kind of just have to push through it, and eventually I drifted off to sleep. And then the next day I got up and went outside, and the wind was still, it just never stopped. The snow was blowing so hard that you couldn't open your eyes and walk in the direction of the wind. You had to like look down day after day, and then more snow, and then I was worried, like, what if the storm just doesn't end? It was like October.
It's like the end of the world. Yeah. I'm in my tent, and
still.
Yeah, it would have sucked if you found out the rest of civilization was destroyed and you were stuck fending for yourself in the middle of the.
And so I mean, after like a day or two, it was like it was cool. It was just very lonely and just like, okay, this is like I got to wait out the snow. I actually got rescued in a helicopter because it's required after a certain amount of time they come out and pick you up.
Wow. You got lucky. You're like, thank God I didn't want to walk through all of that.
So what I was going to say is as we were leaving, I was like, so I had a topo map. And I was like, so I've been studying this topo map for the past 5 days. Are there any
talking
material.
to it, making sweet love?
Exactly. Learning how to fold like little shirt into little
origami.
Yeah, he's a master at origami now, I bet.
So I was asking him, just about the area and stuff, and he's like, oh, there's a ranger cabin like less than a mile away, full of food and like, comic books. Well, it wasn't comic books, but I built that up in my head. But he was like, yeah, it was really warm, like this, cabin. And I was like,
firewood matches.
That shit ain't on the map. That needs to be a square or like a little dot or something that signifies a structure.
Or just a picture of a comic book.
Superman.
Exactly.
I think if you knew how to play solitaire, that time would have gone quicker.
That's right, because it would have taken you 55 games to win.
Yeah.
So that fear is really valid because the weather changed on you, and that was a valid concern.
Yeah, it was like imminent danger.
Right. So did you go in with any fears? Like,
oh, dude,
were you scared? Like, oh, when the sun goes down, it's going to be scary because it's going to be dark and I'm not going to be able to see what's around me, or bears are going to attack me, or any of the other things people think are the things you should be afraid
of.
The
moose is going to come for you in the dark.
I don't know. I never. Maybe like uncertainties, little things, nothing major, but. I was just so ecstatic to be out there. This place is so wild. Like there's herds of caribou and, a moose. I had a moose encounter the first night. It came like 12 feet.
Wow.
And he was just like staring at me and it kept walking towards me. And I was just like in shock and awe and just like, what do I do? I don't know what to do. This is like, but I was just kind of like lost in the moment, I guess. This giant animal I had never been that close to. I never really thought about at least in that circumstance, I never really thought about any fear really of, I don't know. I was navigating. You have to micro navigate because there's all these little ponds. So there's no nothing, no bearings to take off anything because it's a big plateau. It's like, and you're just navigating all day, looking at wildlife, finding social trails, and just admiring the beauty. So on that particular trip, I didn't start out with any uncertainties or fear.
So what about all of you? When the sun goes down, does the mood change? Does it get sexy?
As I peel off that stiff, salty, sweaty shirt.
But does it start to get more frightening because you can't?
I think your mind can definitely take over. My questions that I asked when I was going someplace and I had a destination, I would always say, hey, what's the bear activity? What's going on? And so if I knew there was bear activity, wherever it was that I was stopping, of course your mind tends to, really run away from you because you're like, there's a bear in the area. So every little thing you hear, it's that bear. But for the most part...
I did experience that.
Yes.
Leaves moving.
Yes.
That's a bear.
The real bear I saw was far less frightening than the imaginary bear that I didn't see. That I thought,
at the mouth.
Yeah, seriously, the imaginary bear really scared me.
Was it Boo Boo with a picnic basket?
Hello, Boo Boo.
I got your picnic basket.
Exactly. But, for the most part, I would just sort of settle in and I was just like, okay, look at the sky. Like I would focus, I would take the time to focus on something, like if it was just absolutely a clear sky, then I would stay up, past backpackers midnight and I would just enjoy the sky. I would because you could always see amazing shooting stars and things like that. I think it's
that's one of my favorite things about backpacking or camping in general. But for me, I think other than the odd noise, for me, the only time the odd noises bother me is when I have not properly secured my food. And I'm like sleeping with the emergency candy bar or whatever. And I'm like, uh-oh. Someone's coming for my Snickers bar.
Exactly.
But I always looked forward to night. I think it is. It's the stars. There's something calming about it. And I always enjoyed that. But I will say there were so many times when I go backpacking in the summer that I'm asleep by like 7 o'clock. My sleeping bag pulled over my head as if it's night.
Right, you're too tired to be scared because
I'm too tired.
so you pass out before the sun goes
put
down.
in my
Pretty much
earplugs
do.
so I can't hear what's coming for me.
You're like, it'll surprise
So
me.
you can't hear Yogi and Boo Boo
Yeah,
outside.
no, I usually don't hear them outside, so I'm totally fine with night.
Yeah, no, I sleep with the harmonica at the head of my tent in that little pocket. So if I hear a bear, like I'm gonna scare it away with my
play 'em a tune?
bad music.
Amazing.
That's what I
Wait,
do.
so is that bear deterrent? Harmonica music?
My harmonica
noise.
music is bear deterrent. It's like.
I actually got told this summer that my shirt was so smelly that was bear deterrent. It's like, thanks, guys.
Have you smelled their saliva?
No.
They don't think that anything we make is stinky.
So how have you smelled bear saliva? I'm curious.
Yeah, tell us about this, Alden.
You don't know. You
You're
don't
like,
know
I
about his
wrestled a
girlfriend.
bear.
My first night on the JMT, I was slept in the Half Dome Junction, Clouds Rest Junction.
Uh-huh.
A bear came, and I first heard like somebody yelling at the bear, and then 10 minutes later, I heard. So what I did is I had my bear canister and I had my pots on top of it. So I heard my pots get knocked over. So I got up, and this is the first bear encounter I've had, and I was like shaking with adrenaline, and I just jumped out. I knew exactly what it was, and I jumped.
Punched the bear in the face.
The bear's like.
I grabbed my hiking poles and like yelled at it, and it was so funny because I was like hitting my hiking poles, hey, yelling at it, and he looked up at me like, "Is this guy serious?"
He's like, is he messing with me?
Yeah, and then kind of
what does he
like
think he's doing?
stared at me for a few seconds, and then like was like, "Okay."
He's like, does he really think those little poles are stronger than these claws?
So then 5 minutes later, the next guy was, yelling.
He was
at
just
the
going
bear.
from
Not
bear
just going
canister
for-
to
yep.
bear canister.
And actually,
Someone's going to let me have
opportunist.
this. Yeah.
Yeah, so my bear canister had slobber on it. So.
Oh, no.
Was that before or after the bear?
I had like a spiritual encounter with the bear this summer.
Oh.
I swear. So it was the first time. So I've seen plenty of bears, especially in Sequoia. Whenever you're in there, I feel like they're everywhere. It's just crawling with earth sign activity. I was hiking towards the Woods Creek Suspension Bridge. It was about a mile away. And I was on, I don't know, day 500 of like constant thunderstorms at all hours of the day. And there was finally this break in the storm. There was some sun in the sky, and I was so stoked. And I was just like skipping along the trail, no cares in the world. And I had my sun hat on because I could finally wear it. And I hear like over to my left, and I turn, and within an arm's reach, I could have high-fived this bear.
What?
This beautiful cinnamon black bear was just looming over me, and he looked just as shocked to see me as I did to see him. And I just said, "Hey, bear." And he looked over at me, and we locked eyes, which I'm pretty sure you're not supposed to do, but we had a moment. And then he about a solid minute, and then he like trundled off into the granite.
You're like, thank you.
And I could hear my own heartbeat for like an hour after that.
Seriously.
But I was like, okay, well, I'm cool for the rest of my trip, right? Because I had the bear encounter. We could have touched.
You're like,
hands.
bear encounter done.
Done.
You know,
Check that off the
lightning
list.
done.
Done.
The heavy water crossing done.
Done. Great.
You're like,
taking care of everything.
Done, so
I'm
I don't
good.
need to worry about it again.
All right, you guys have done my job for me again and segued us into another talking point. So we're yeah, man.
We're so
so
good
you
at
guys
this.
are talking about the scary bears and everything. So let's talk about what the real dangers are. So what are the dangers going out by yourself versus with other people in the backcountry?
The real danger.
The real dangers? I think lack of preparation
Yeah.
is the biggest danger.
Number one.
Honestly, the number one danger. I think if you do your research, I started planning. I knew a year before I was going to do the John Muir Trail. I committed. I was like, okay, I'm doing the John Muir Trail next summer. And then in September, I got all my maps and I got the books that I thought I was going to use for referencing. And then I spent a solid 9 months of doing every preparation. I was asking myself all sorts of questions, and
You do a lot of preparation.
I do. I'm really
Yeah.
one. I mean, I literally had the maps on the wall. I was figuring out like where I wanted to camp, and what's realistic. How many miles do I want to walk? I was reading. I mean, because you don't know until you get there, but you hear like, oh,
Yeah.
you should camp by this lake,
Right,
or you should
right.
go. But you might actually want to keep walking that day. So I kind of had had a loose itinerary, but I did have food resupplies where people were meeting me on the trail. So I had to stick to some sort of itinerary to make sure that, I met them. A couple places I had, stuff shipped, but I'm going to say the biggest preparation is it's preparation is what you really need to do. Because if you ask and answer yourself a lot of questions, you're not going to be ill prepared. When I was getting my permit at the permit station, there was one kid who had quit his job 2 weeks ago and had everything he thought he needed, including all his food, to do the John Muir Trail, and he never made it out of Little Yosemite. Like he was just done because he was so ill prepared. So, I think if you've thru-hiked before and you have what you're doing, I think you can more spontaneously, do something solo. But if you've never done that before, I mean, you should be taking the time to really do your research. There's so much information out there on the internet. There's amazing books out there. There's, just a plethora of resources that there is no reason that you should go out there ill-prepared.
Yeah, I think you are your number one biggest danger on the trail when going solo because, there are a lot of people I've met that were not prepared for weather, for instance. A lot of people who hike the PCT and are coming from other places, whether it's, other countries, even other parts of the state, other cities, whatever. There's this misconception that the first 700 miles of the PCT is desert. Now, we live in a Mediterranean climate and all that, but there are, 5 major mountain ranges in the first 700 miles of the PCT, and they all get snow, and they can all get snow well into, late spring, early summer. And this summer that happened, there was a freak snowstorm in June, and I was on the trail up near Idlewild. And I saw some absolutely miserable people struggling with their tarps. They didn't know how to set them up properly for the wind. They didn't know how to keep the rain out, and they didn't have any protection against the snow. A lot of that. There's this guy named Ned Tibbetts who does, I think his company's called Mountain Education or something. But he is kind of dedicated towards helping PCT hikers specifically get ready for the trail every year and the possibility of snow. And that he talks about it. He's like, so don't bring an ice axe if you don't know how to use it. Don't bring crampons if you don't know how to use it. If you're going to use a tarp tent, know how to set it up in all different kinds of conditions. And, I think, kind of going towards what Pamela says, I didn't prepare quite in the same way that she did, but I know how to use my gear. I know what I have. Everything I had, I used in one way or the other.
Yeah. I actually spent time making sure that I did all of my backpacking trips above 10,000 feet, and I was measuring my fuel because I wanted to know how much fuel was I going to use. It burns differently at elevation, versus if I just do a local trip. So I was literally weighing stuff because I didn't want to carry too much and I didn't want to carry too little. So, I was really, when I knew it was going to storm, I would intentionally go out for 3 or 4 days in the rain. Oh, great, we have a storm coming in. Let me go out and let me test all of my seriously. I am. Shawnte, this is like Shawnte always says, hey, we're doing the hardest part on the PCT.
You want to go?
You want to
She
go?
always does.
And I'm like, yes, I do.
Do you want to do 25 miles
it was
with
stuff
no
like
water?
that because I really wanted to know. I didn't want it the tent that I chose to get for this trip, I got an entirely different tent because you can set up the rain fly and the footprint, crawl inside, and then set the tent up. And I wanted to do that. And I actually had to set up my tent multiple days where it was pouring rain. And had I had a different tent, all of my gear would have gotten soaking wet. So, it was things like that. I just really wanted to make sure that in the worst case scenario, I was in the best that I could be.
Right.
Yeah, I think you guys make a great point about making sure you know how to use your gear and you've tested it. Because I think sometimes people assume they know how to use things. I had an experience where I was going through Subway to canyon, not very difficult canyon in Zion. It was me and a friend of mine, and we had to rescue 10 people.
Wow.
Because they showed up with what their gear was recommended to them. There were 10 of them. They showed up with one harness.
Oh, my gosh.
They showed up with one carabiner with one rappel device.
What? Oh, my gosh.
And they had never used any of those things. So they had a brand new rope and they had a brand new harness and brand new webbing and all these things.
That's just an accident waiting to happen.
Yeah, and I think people think, if I have a rope, I'll know what to do with a rope. And not realizing all of the technical skill that goes into that. And I think it's a great point about the tent. People think, I know how to put up a tent.
Right.
Well, make sure you know how to put up this tent.
Yeah.
Because
make sure you know how to do it in high winds.
Right.
Let me tell you, when it's windy and windy and
it's
raining.
It's very different putting up a tent.
Yeah, exactly. That tent is not nearly as easy as much as you think that you can do it.
Yeah, I have put up my tent in 50-mile-an-hour winds in the rain in extreme cold, and I felt pretty damn confident getting on the trail this summer that I think the other thing I think about too as we're talking, this kind of came to me, is that a lot of people think of external dangers like getting hurt. And that's totally legit. But I think if anybody is planning on going on any sort of solo backpack of any great length, take basic first aid, take wilderness first aid even better if you can, because wilderness first aid is a little different because it teaches you how to take care of things.
And teach you how to improvise with what you have.
Exactly.
It's like, okay, I'm how many days away from getting out? How can I
get through until then?
Yeah, exactly.
How
what
can
do
you
I
help
have?
other people? Whatever. But I do think that's legit because I do think a lot of people wonder, if I'm alone, what happens if I fall and break my leg? Now, if you're on the JMT, someone's going to walk past you in like 5 minutes. So
yeah.
But if you're out, maybe even doing the CDT, the Continental Divide Trail, or if you're out doing some
or even
more
like
remote
peak bagging,
backpacking,
you're on the GMT, you're like me, and you want to hit a couple peaks. Okay, that's where you're off the trail, and that's where you're much more remote.
Yeah, and so you have to learn how to take care of yourself. Maybe carry a spot device or an InReach. I know Pamela's got one of those.
Yeah, I love my InReach.
I don't know. What do you think?
Yeah, talk about those because that was one of the things I was going to ask you guys about is carrying any kind of personal
We're so
locator
good at
beacon
leading this podcast
or
ourselves.
anything
you
like
could just
that.
go home.
So with the InReach, I take it when I do solo canyoneering trips because I feel that there's a lot more risk of something happening because there's rope and an anchor and all these different things.
Potential rock
a lot of
fall,
places
yeah,
that things can fail.
I never felt the need going by myself on the trail, but I don't know how that would have gone if I was in Newfoundland if I had an InReach. Or something like that. It definitely would have gone differently. I ended up being fine.
Yeah.
So
for me, it's weird. The InReach is, I always let my friends know, okay, this is my itinerary. I'm leaving this day. I should be home by this day.
Yeah.
I will contact you by this time when I return. If I don't, they have access to where I am. And because they have my itinerary, worst case scenario, and, anything can happen on the trail you don't know, I figured I'll at least have that ping. They'll at least know where I am.
Although that I will say my friend Brooke was so sweet. So I took a spot this summer and I put my friends Jay and Brooke as kind of they got the daily message like, I'm cool, everything's good. Jay was like, cool, good, I know where you are. I look on the map, that's cool. And Brooke was like, every time I got that, it just reminded me that you were out there alone.
That's awesome.
I'm like, all right, next time I won't put you as my contact.
But it worked out really well, though, for my resupplies, because my resupplies were like, hey, I can see that you're, right on schedule, or you're actually early. Like, there was one of my last resupply over Carishars Pass, we had a later arrival time for my friends to bring me my last resupply, and they were like, I see you're much closer than your original itinerary, so we're going to meet you much earlier, since we're doing the hike 15 miles in and out, and we're driving back to LA. And I was like, that's perfect. This is like, I will totally meet you guys earlier.
So right now, somebody listening is saying, what the hell is an InReach and what is a spot?
Fair enough.
And maybe,
Fair enough,
and maybe they're
yes.
trying to search on the internet to find it if they're not driving or
Secret
something.
words.
So one of you or all of you want to explain what those
1,
devices
2,
are?
3, go.
All at once.
Well, they're both a little different, but they're both they kind of act one as a personal locator beacon. You can set them up to sort of ping out your little position. You get to camp, and what most people do is they get to camp and set the thing on it till it gets a satellite signal, and then boop, it pings it out to whomever has the link or whoever's on the receiving end, and it shows where you are right there.
and it's satellite, so it works anywhere.
Yeah, it's
long as there's not heavy tree cover.
global
Yeah,
satellite
or you're in a
system, so
canyon.
they're
Or
really
if you're
good.
hiding in a cave.
The InReach is pretty much the same. The difference between the Spot and the InReach is it's actually a two-way communicator where you can
Yeah.
actually, text in a way. So if something were to happen, search and rescue, I could say, this is my situation. I have a compound fracture. I'm fine. I'm stable. Or whatever the situation is. It also, allowed in the instance that I was kind of explaining with my friends who were like, oh, I see you're earlier. Like they were able to text me and say, I can see that you're, much, further along the trail for this last resupply. So because we're coming in, so they texted me and said, you're much closer, we're going to come in and we'll meet you 3 or 4 hours earlier. And I was like, that's perfect. So it allows you to do all of that, which I think is great. I think
it's an extra layer.
It is an extra layer. It's a little more expensive, but to me, that was worth the expense.
Yeah, I'd say the one time I'd wished I had an InReach instead of just a Spot was when this summer I was in Kings Canyon and I could see smoke and smell smoke, but we didn't know where it was coming from. And I was, it was nice. I was I'd met up with some other hikers, and we didn't find anything out until we reached a ranger station a couple days later. So
That's
that would have been
interesting
a
that
good
you say that,
time to have an InReach.
Yeah, because we were actually I was heading towards Forester Pass. So I was at the highest camp, heading southbound, and there was fire, and there were people actually coming back over Forester, like they weren't summiting and going down, heading towards Whitney. And I literally I texted my friends and said, find out where the fire is, how many miles away, because when you're that high, if you don't really know how to read a map, like I would have gotten up to that summit and I would have read the map and I would have seen how many ridges away it was, and I would have known, like, okay, that's further. But the hikers that decided to turn around and not continue on the John Muir Trail, they were afraid of that fire, which understandably so. I was looking at other routes off the map, but that's actually how I used it. I did use it as like, hey, call the rangers, find out, and text me what's the deal with the fire. So it allowed me the next day to continue forward rather than turn around and backtrack. So
now I'm going to move us into another point that I think can kind of segue off of this and kind of piggyback on this. So contingencies, how do you plan for those? The unforeseen circumstances, or things that could maybe go wrong that or areas that could get closed off, or do you plan for those things? Do you make a plan for those kinds?
Yeah, I think you got to know how to read a map, man.
Yeah.
Basic map reading skills are key, because that can happen anywhere. You can get somewhere, and in the summer, a lot of people got trapped by the rough fire, the rough fire, right? That huge one in Sequoia. A lot of people didn't know all the exit points out of the Sierra. So either you need to study up and do what Pamela did and research really well, and or know and carry maps. A lot of people now kind of rely on their phones and the apps on their phones,
which I think is so wrong. What if what if the app fails? What if you lose signal? What if you have no battery power?
Run
out of juice.
What if it gets wet and malfunctions?
Yeah. Have a good map, know how to read it. There's a lot of, you can take classes at REI. You could take, Pamela and I are both instructors for the Sierra Club's Wilderness Travel course here in LA. We teach you how to read a topo map.
Exactly.
But I do think map reading is key, and to understanding, Pamela just gave a great example with the fires, and of course, if the comic book station had been on the map in Newfoundland, maybe Alden would have gotten out sooner.
He would have had a warm, toasty fire.
Hanging out with his moose in the lodge, But I do think things like that are key, is that don't go into something blindly, and there's some basic backcountry skills you should have. You should know how to start a fire without
your 10 essentials.
10 essentials.
10 essentials,
have
right
your
there.
10 essentials, kids.
Yeah.
Do you want to tell everybody what those 10 essentials are?
Woo!
All
right.
Oh my God!
Extra water, extra food,
rain, shelter,
weather protection, fire,
extra headlamp.
There you go.
Light,
good one.
first aid,
map and compass, and know how to use them.
Do you say rain gear, or do you already say?
Weather protection.
Weather protection.
Sunglasses? Or?
Yes.
Sun protection.
Sun protection. So that would be like hat, sunscreen, sunglasses.
Mm-hmm.
Oh.
Is a knife a part of that? Well, like
yes.
general repair.
A knife
repair.
is, general repair, yes.
Compass and a map.
General repair. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So we're
and you have to know how to use this stuff. That's the key. Don't just throw a bunch of stuff in your bag that somebody sold you at the store and then be like, I'm fine.
And even like an additional shelter, like an additional bivvy sack.
like a bivvy, or even
like
one
in
of
your
those
situation,
blankets.
What if the tent did shred or something in the wind? Maybe
do you
not
have
in
a
that.
way to repair
do you have a way to repair it? So you need,
duct tape, whatever, something.
Yeah.
I had dental floss with me this summer, and I was so glad I did, because during one of the insane storms, I was at Charlotte Lake, and the lightning bolt just crashed down pretty close by, and I dove in my tent, ripped the mesh, and then I sat in there for 30 minutes sewing it with dental floss.
You're like, I love you, dental floss.
Did you have a needle with you? What did you use to sew with?
Yes, I did have a needle with me.
So needle and dental floss. Thread is not necessary.
I used that many times. Many times this summer.
But this stuff doesn't have to be really heavy, because I try to go as light as possible.
Or expensive.
Or expensive. So my 10,000 essentials literally fits in a small little bag, and it's everything I need, and I've used everything in there. Mm-hmm. So it doesn't,
everything except for my emergency whistle. Although when you get sad and lonely in Newfoundland, maybe you could just whistle yourself some tunes.
So let's go over what you pack. So you carry your 10 essentials, all of you?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Alden?
Yeah.
Are you lying?
Yeah, that was.
I know that was not believable.
It's like the 10-ish.
Yes,
I carry the 10-ish essentials.
I call them 10,000 because I actually carry a lot of extra stuff. Like I will always carry a tiny little thing of DEET or a bug net, because I've just been places where I'm hiking and I'm nowhere near water, but it's very buggy. So, that has just saved me from just having a miserable time to where I had a great time.
Mm-hmm.
So
let's go over that gear, because you could easily take a pack and fill it full of 80 pounds of things.
Sure.
Or
don't
you
need
could
to.
fill it full of 30 and maybe have a better time.
Yeah, I mean, I like to have some cord, some lightweight, cheap cord, just the length of it. I mean, you can also use it to hang up your laundry. You
extra
can use
shoelaces, a shoelace
Oh, yeah.
breaks, those are all things.
You
Like
can use it to repair your pack if you need to. That's pretty cheap and light. I always like a little duct tape, but you can wrap it around your tent poles, your Nalgene bottle. I wrap it into like a little thing of its own.
Yeah, I've got it in like multiple locations with my gear. I'm like, I've got duct tape here and duct tape there, and I change it out every year because it actually will stick to itself.
Yeah,
and
it doesn't come out.
Yeah, it doesn't
What
come
about
out.
shelters? Do you guys, any of you use like tarps or?
I have a little emergency bivvy, like the little ones that are about $15 through.
But like your shelter, is a tent?
My shelter's a tent.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I bring my tent, but I also have usually a little tarp that I use as a footprint, and then I usually have that cord with me. And I've actually had to set it up before as like a windbreak, so
Okay. Yeah.
or extra rain cover.
Yeah, you see these guys with their. I mean, you need some kind of shelter system, and you see these. When you're hiking on the trail for that long, you're bound to see like everything.
Oh yeah.
And the tarp setups and how these people rig them up so they're all balanced properly. And I'm like, I don't know if I could do that.
Nope.
Looks lightweight, but
Yeah,
I feel like it would be really
tarp-
difficult to do those. And what we're talking about, right? I'm assuming is what you're talking about where you see people where they use like their trekking poles. Is their tent poles and then
Yeah.
and their tarp. What about wind and rain?
You can do it. I had
so rain
yeah.
it keeps
Yeah.
the rain out, but wind. I mean,
Right, but setting it up and
but-
keeping it balanced.
It's actually I
It's
hiked
just
on and off with a guy this
tension,
summer who had it pretty down pat. He had never used it before he hopped on the PCT. So I mean he'd practiced at home, but I met him while I was in the insane storm section, and he every night slept under that in his little bivy sack and
But what
was
about
dry
bugs?
as a bone.
Do you have like a?
We've had a 4-year drought, so we had no bugs.
Yeah.
But yeah, that would be the problem with those. You can get mesh liners for them, like bathtub
Yeah,
floors with mesh liners so that you can keep the water out.
Then
at
it's
the
like
bottom, and
the
then
weight. Then
it's not
is-
really a tarp, but
Yeah.
it's a tarp tent at that point.
So I've had a bug crawl in my ear.
Nope. I had a friend who, just
That's
A
why I
big
like
beetle.
the tent.
no,
That's why I
thanks.
like
but
the tent.
it was on a canyoneering trip where you're carrying. I had a 65-pound pack and no tent. So I mean, you're carrying.
That's when that
hundreds and hundreds of
emergency
feet of
bug
rope.
net, I would sleep with that on my face.
Yeah, that's actually
seriously.
not a bad idea.
I would
So that
honestly
I
sleep
think
with that
I
on my
did have
face.
that, or I usually bring it. Somehow I wasn't wearing it, and I woke up with scratching at my ear, and I flicked something out, and I looked down at the ground, and there was like this big old beetle, and I was like, oh my god, that was in my ear. And then I looked over, and there was a spider next to it, and I was like, was that in my ear? You got the beetle?
That's why every time I cowboy camp, which is camping without your tent, out in the desert, I always surround myself with all of my things as if it's some sort of barrier.
Exactly,
Nothing can
they
crawl
will
above
never
my back.
crawl. Yes.
They will never go on
Can't
my
find any
tarp.
hole through it.
Exactly.
I hear if you
seriously.
make a pentagram out of salt around your campsite,
Yes.
you'll be
Something else,
safe.
Jason.
I keep
We
a vial
made
of
that.
holy water with me.
So let's talk about food, water. What do you carry in regards to those?
Oh, I
You don't
am
carry
an
those
avid
things?
chef, and I dehydrate all of my own food, so I eat really, really well on
Yeah.
the trail.
Wow.
Yeah, I like to eat
When are we
real
going
food
backpacking
too.
next?
Yeah, seriously, like there's no.
She only goes by herself, Alden. Sorry.
Yeah, exactly. You
Well,
can't.
can I
You
hike,
can trail me.
couple hundred feet?
Exactly.
Yeah, you can just
trail me.
accidentally show up.
Like, hey, I heard you were here. I was watching your,
You
InReach.
could dress up as a bear. Yeah, I'm with Pamela. I do a lot of dehydrating my own food, and it is the jam. I will say, because there's things you get sick of. Like if you do any long distance, I mean, I'm sure you guys experience
yeah.
this on the trail too. Like, I remember getting halfway through my PCT trip this summer, and I just wanted to throw tuna packets at people. Like I did not want to eat those. I still to this day have not had tuna. I hate it with a passion.
It's a trip because I actually had so many meals made that within 1 week's resupply did not have a duplicate meal.
That's right.
Because I
You fancy.
literally spent about 2.5 months just making all
Wow.
of this food, and
Man,
so I
that's
had
dedication.
yeah no I mean that's what I was saying about my planning. Like it wasn't like last minute. I was like okay,
Right.
I literally had an itinerary. This week I'm doing this. This week I'm doing that. I need to get my permits. I need to do this. So I was really, really very meticulous on my planning because I wanted the experience to be epic, and it absolutely was.
Yeah. Well, and I think with water, we're all based here in Southern California, and there's something, when I think about the PCT, this is one of the biggest questions that come up for people who are hiking it for the first time, and people who have, like I said, maybe never hiked in the desert. There's kind of a rule of thumb thereabouts that, you can probably 5 miles, 1 liter of water. Now, on a cold day, I never drink a liter in 5 miles. It's like a liter in 9 miles or something. And then on a really hot day, it might be 1 mile or, 3 miles, 1 liter. But, you kind of figure out your own math, and this is part of the prep, is that you go hiking in these conditions, you figure out what you need, and then I always carry a little bit extra because I have been very thirsty and dehydrated. I summited San Gorgonio with no water, and my friend and I shared margarita-flavored shot blocks at the top and just pretended it was liquid margarita, and it was the saddest moment.
Yes, I've done that with a dehydrated Gatorade, where I'm just like, oh, it's so good, because, it's so bitter at that point.
Yeah.
It, causes you to salivate, and water forms in your mouth, and it's the best experience ever at that moment.
Yeah. So, and you want to have a way to treat your water. So, there's obviously places, I'd say alpine areas, where you could probably get away with not treating it. But in general, there's a lot of Giardia out there, and I think that, I carry a Sawyer Mini with me. It's kind of a pain in the ass sometimes because it's not as free-flowing as the Sawyer. It's kind of a filter you can screw onto a bottle, or they come with little annoying bags that break, so you use a bottle.
I actually use a Sawyer too, but I also carry iodine tablets in case
I carry
I'm out for a
Aquamira
long
as a backup
period of time, and the filter breaks or something happens and it's not usable for me.
You do not want to have the shits in the woods.
Yeah.
I tell you what. But yeah, I think knowing what you go through, because everyone's different. I've gone on a hike with other people, and I've said, here's our miles. There is literally no water. Pamela and I did a section recently, 22.5 miles of the PCT, no water, all uphill. And I was like, okay, you guys figure out what you need. And I know they're both experienced backpackers. They'll bring what they need. We all had a little bit extra, but it's better to plan for extra than to not have enough.
Yeah.
But water is heavy, so definitely know what you need going in.
Yeah, my water was 17.5 pounds, and my food was 2.5 pounds.
Yep.
That was the ratio.
That's Southern
But
California
technically,
water.
some of that water was your food.
Yes, exactly.
Because you need to rehydrate it.
Exactly.
What about UV? Do any of you use UV, or are you strictly all filter people for your water?
I've used a SteriPen, and then it broke on me in Yosemite when I was doing the Pohono Trail, and I've never used it again. It was a bummer. They actually replaced it. They said it was a defective unit, but I don't trust it anymore.
I don't. I've seen it. I've been out with people who have used it, and it just seemed so much work. And it was always like, I can't tell if the light's on.
It's a pain in the ass.
So I've been a filter person. Backup, iodine tablets.
Yeah,
so.
Aquamira drops are probably my favorite because they're the least effort, and you just have to wait for it 15 minutes. And it doesn't really taste like much.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I used one of those Inline Sawyer filters in my Camelback when I was on the JMT, and just scoop up water and just drink it, filter it as it goes.
Nice.
Yeah, so I never really bothered. And when you're in the Sierra, it's at least where I was, there's water everywhere.
And it's the best water ever.
It's like snow melt.
Yeah, I came up there from the high desert, and I remember there was one day, and Pamela's heard this story, but hiked 10 miles through a burnt area, so there's no shade anywhere. There was one point where I crawled under a bush like a small animal just to get some shade. And at the end of this is Rockhouse Basin and Mantor Creek. And I knew it would be running pretty low, but I was not prepared for it to just be a small seep in the ground. And there were about 15 hikers, because this is the thing. If you do any hiking in the desert, people, it's like we're little animals gathering around the water holes. Water. And we sat there at the seep and filtered, and it was the saddest moment. I think every time I've gone to a restaurant since then, I finish my cup of water. I'll never take it for granted again.
I think I've seen you, Alden. You also have one of those bottles where you can dip it and then it filters directly through the cap, right?
Yeah, I do. I have that. I take that canyoneering, not so much backpacking, but, if you're in a wet canyon, there's no reason to carry a bunch of water in your backpack. It's all around you. So
you're like, I just wring out my stuff.
You scoop it up in a bottle. And
do you find that works well, that bottle?
I mean, it works insofar as, I can drink the water. In terms of it working, the filter working, I haven't gotten the shits. I don't know if the filter's not working and the water's fine.
But you don't have to worry about clogging or anything like that.
Oh, you have to backflush them.
This one, I guess this one, it lasts for a certain amount of time, and I don't use it that often. But I always wonder, so the little nipple thing that you suck from, the little...
Well, you're changing this podcast quickly.
The sippy valve.
The sippy valve.
The sippy nippy.
PG man.
Is it's in the canyon water. So, like, does that? I always
So
wondered
you're
that.
one of these days
Does
you're
that-
gonna, that counts. That counts.
That small amount of water that's...
Yep. You know how tiny those things are?
I know, but don't you need like a certain amount of crypto or
They're pretty microscopic.
No,
Yeah.
but don't you need a certain amount to...
No, 'cause
That
they'll
amount can
breed.
live on
Yeah,
the nipple tip.
yeah.
Okay, well,
But backflushing, one of the things you have to do, so if you're bringing a big filter or a Sawyer, you might have to backflush. Like a lot of the stuff on the southern end of the PCT, I had to backflush because you'd get, especially last year when the water was all super low and you just get a bunch of murky muck. And so a lot of people on the PCT, instead of carrying those bags that come with the Sawyer filters, they would just carry a smart water bottle. And that way you can use it to backflush from. You just put clean water in it and you screw the Sawyer onto it and then squeeze the clean water through the Sawyer and then you watch the shit flow out and then you don't get the shits. It's amazing.
Watch the shit flow out so you don't get the
So you
shits.
don't get the
Yep.
That's what we learned today.
Getting technical here, guys.
Is that what it says on the back of the box when you buy?
Definitely.
What about stoves?
Pamela makes, have you done the cat stoves? Have you guys done those, the cat food or beer can stoves?
No,
Like the little
I haven't
alcohol
been-
stoves?
Yeah.
I've
Yeah,
never
those that's hard in SoCal
did
because we're
not
so
like it.
dry. You
Yeah,
probably
those I
shouldn't use
wouldn't
those.
just because of the reason that they're easy to kick over and then just lose your flame and have a natural disaster right before your eyes. But I have a couple stoves. I have my Whisperlite, which I use when I do a lot of mountaineering because you end up melting a lot of your snow.
yeah.
And it's incredibly dependable at high
That's the white
altitudes.
guess?
Yeah.
Yeah, and I actually took that one on the JMT with me because I knew I could, that was the one I was weighing my fuel and I could see what was in there and I had a better idea of what my burn rates were. I also have a little Vargo alcohol stove, which I love. And that one, it's like 5 ounces and it's really dependable. And I've even taken that one on some longer trips as well.
Although I will say that sometimes you look at me with longing eyes when my Jetboil cooks my food very fast.
I actually
It's still
do,
simmering.
especially when we're in sub-zero temperatures. And I'm like,
And then I feel guilty inside, but also glad that my food is ready.
I didn't realize I was that obvious as I leaned towards your warmth.
So is your preference canister stoves then?
Yeah, I think for me, because I still like to do a lot of cooking on trail, so I'll actually bring fresh food with me the first few days of a trip, and we'll go through the whole tedious process of like chopping up potatoes and doing all that. So it really depends. Like this summer, because I wasn't gonna, when I was on the PCT, I was like, no, I'm just gonna be reheating water heating water basically. I used my Jetboil burner with a canister and called it a day. I have a pocket rocket too, which is great because those are super light and you just don't get the same simmer control. So there's some stoves, some canister stoves, you'll get great simmer control, and those are good for cooking because you can control how hot it gets. And then some of them, it's just like, flame torch, blowtorch. So those are just good for boiling water and burning things.
But I think there's a preference for everybody. I mean, there's so
yeah.
many different stoves out there. So I think it's how you want to cook. Like if you
Yeah.
want to cook your own food, if you want to just rehydrate and boil water,
Yeah.
there are just so many options.
Yeah, I use a canister stove. I have a little Snow Peak that I've been using for 10 years, and the Sparker is kind of out, but it's works pretty good.
Yeah, I have a little canister stove that I like. It's a little $35 one, just a screw-on stovetop.
Big
You put
five?
on a canister. No, it came from, I think, Sport Chalet. But it doesn't have an igniter, so you have to ignite it yourself.
yeah.
Yeah, that's how the pocket rocket
Most
is.
of them kind of wear out anyway.
Yeah.
Oh, they always, the
So
little
the
yes,
igniter
They
they-
last
doesn't break,
once,
which is great.
Yeah.
Yeah, you have to bend them back. That's what happens a lot is when you store them, they get bent, and so you just have to unbend them, and they'll start igniting again. But yeah, I just bring that's part of your 10 essentials, kids.
Exactly.
Matches
Bring
are lighter.
Waterproof matches, extra lighter.
Stormproof matches.
But the great
Yes.
thing, if it doesn't have an igniter, it's smaller, it's lighter, it's cheaper, and it doesn't break.
Yeah.
I was on a trip in Canada years back, and we got hit by rain for 4 straight days, and we were meeting multiple people who were saying, our stove's broken. We can't cook food. Our stove's broken. And I just had that little bitty canister stove, and I never had a single problem with it. I just light it with a flint.
So
I
everyone
don't
was
have to use
looking
up
at you with
matches or
knowing
whatever.
eyes, like, oh, you have the
yeah,
stove.
the sad eyes.
Like, oh, he doesn't look as skinny as us. Maybe he has an operating
Small
stove.
whimpering noises.
We've kind of discussed planning and navigating to a certain degree. I mean, we all talked about you guys think maps are still
Maps are sexy.
Oh,
good
maps
thing to bring
yeah.
with you.
I think GPSs are a great second to your map, but don't rely on it, honestly.
No, learn how to read a
Yeah,
map.
learn how to read a map. It's amazing. It's like a second
It
language.
opens up the outdoors. Like you can
Yeah.
leave the trails. You can see
Yeah.
what's around you. You can identify. You can figure out where there might be water. Like there's so many, awesome things. You can fold them into origami if you get trapped in Newfoundland for 5 days. Like anything could happen with them. Maps are awesome.
So on my map, you had the JMT maps.
I did. I had, the Tom Harris maps.
So on the back of mine, I have my journal.
Nice.
You can
Oh,
write-
that's awesome.
That's cool.
That's
Yeah.
so cool. Yeah, those are waterproof too, which is really nice.
Yeah, and I personally, I love maps so much. I did
Yeah.
WTC.
Oh, nice.
And
Nice.
yeah, I've learned like so much from Bob Myers.
Oh,
and-
Bob is the jam.
I think
Yeah.
I was
I'm
a
in Bob's
cartographer
group.
in a previous
Oh,
life because I've
and-
been looking at maps since I was a
yeah.
little kid. Like I'm fascinated with
And I'm the
maps.
same way. I love maps. I'll sit and
Yeah.
look at maps for hours and look for canyons or
Yeah, that's the thing.
plan
Maps
routes
just they
or
show
whatever.
you. It's like another portal into the outdoors.
Yeah.
It
You
does
get that,
because
and it
you
just
see
expands
things and
your
you're like,
world.
I want to go there. How do
Yeah,
I get
what
there?
is
And then you
that?
figure out a route to get there.
Or
And
maybe
it's-
I can camp there. Like if you're doing
Yeah.
off-trail stuff, you're like, there's that sweet saddle. Let's aim for that and see what it looks like.
So, Alden, you mentioned WTC. Tell people what that is.
wilderness travel course. It's a course by the Sierra Club that I guess you guys teach.
We are leaders in that
Yeah,
course,
it's
or,
a
well,
10-week
staff members.
incredibly comprehensive wilderness travel course, and we cover everything. So it's a perfect class for the novice, and it's a perfect class for the experienced person because you will walk away learning something.
And you'll come up with backpacking buddies, people to do outdoor stuff with, It's fun. You go on a couple field trips. You do 2-day trips. One is a local hike, anywhere up to maybe 14 miles. They call it a conditioning hike. It's really to see who isn't in condition. And you do a lot of navigation practice. And then there's snowshoeing, snow travel.
Yeah,
You learn
snow
how to do
travel.
that.
Then we have a 2-day weekend in Joshua Tree where it's all about navigation, and then you do a really great third-class scramble up to one of the peaks,
Yeah, learn some rock
4377.
techniques.
And then the big hurrah is the 3-day snow camping trip,
Oh,
which is
yeah, in the
so
Eastern Sierra.
much fun. Yeah, it's in the Eastern Sierra.
Except for when it's 9 degrees out. That's not as fun. But
I think
it's
we're
usually
gonna
not
have
9
we're
degrees
gonna
out.
have a good year this year.
Yeah,
so
it's
it's
gonna
above
be epic.
yeah, it's above average right now.
Yeah, it's super fun.
Make lots of snow caves and
Yes, bring a yeah, we do. We bring shovel, we snowshoe. It's definitely snow caving this year, doing some igloos.
that's
So
great.
everybody loves maps, especially if you take the time to learn how to read them.
Yes.
Before your trip, do you pore over those maps? Do you look at them to see if you can figure out things like contingency plans or plan your route or try to figure out, oh, this day I need to be here, this day I need to be here? And also, do you ever use anything like Google Earth to try to look for updated or more recent information?
Caltopo.
Yeah, Caltopo is the
Yeah.
jam.
I will use Google Earth if I'm doing something that's off trail. If I'm specifically trying to figure out a route for off trail, because it gives you an alternative to actually, with your maps. If it's something like, Pacific Crest Trail or JMT, I always look for alternative routes. Maps are absolutely important because there are places where there's a crossroad and you want to know where you are. Like, so to me, to not have a map, and there are points where it's not marked, all of a sudden there's just a trail that's coming in or something that looks like you can take any direction. And, if you've been following your route on a map, you can figure out where
Yeah,
you
you know
are.
exactly where
you
you
know
are.
exactly where you are. And I need to continue straight, or I should be making that right. Or, you hear of people getting lost, 1 or 2 days into their trip. And it's surprisingly easy to do if you don't have maps. Because there's a lot of places where if you're not, as aware of what you're looking for, you'll walk right past it.
Right. Well, and I think, too, it's nice for helping you find campsites and figuring out elevation gain and loss. So, I was hiking with somebody recently that was reading the contour lines wrong and the intervals wrong. And so he didn't realize we had quite the gain that we had. I was like, wah, wah. But,
Pleasant surprise.
oh, yeah. But, yeah, they're great to have for planning purposes. I tend to look at mine a lot, too, when I'm on the trail and I'm looking at what's around me. Like trying to identify peaks, and that to me is kind of part of the
Terrain
fun.
recognition.
Yeah, that's the
terrain
fun of it is
recognition.
terrain
Yeah.
recognition. I mean, you have the maps. It's
Absolutely.
like, what do I have in front
Like,
of me?
whoa, that's not Whitney.
that,
What?
yeah.
That's Langley. That's cool.
Yeah.
It's neat to be able to identify what's around you and not just be tunnel vision. Because that's the beauty of going to these places is being in the middle of all of this grandeur. And awesome stuff, and being able to know it and be part
And
of it.
see it. Yeah.
I can't even fathom not having a map. When I first just went out on my own backpacking trip, I went out to Sports Chalet, bought a map, and studied it. Like it's a foreign concept.
Yeah, it would be
having a
like
map.
driving with your eyes closed to me.
Yeah,
it's
crazy.
that just to me it just says everything can go wrong right now because you can't. In the wilderness travel course, we teach you how to stay found, and that's a huge component of that is knowing where you are on the map, knowing terrain recognition, and always knowing where you are because if something goes wrong, you have a way out. You know that there's these alternative routes or whatnot. Shawnte had mentioned, fires where people had gotten trapped because they weren't aware, they didn't know alternative routes, things like that. It's, maps to me are critical and, just are an absolutely important component to all of your gear and to going out into the backcountry.
Yeah.
Cartographers all over the world are so happy to hear this right now. We're not losing our jobs.
I know,
Yeah.
and they never will. Like,
One
maps
thing
are
I think-
amazing.
and
they're pretty colors, too.
Yeah, nice to look at. Something for navigating. If you're looking at maps ahead of time, you're getting an image like in your mind. At least this is how it is for me of like where you're gonna go and like how things are oriented north, south. And so you have this like thing built up, so it's a lot harder to get lost.
It's true though, because when you've been looking at a map for so long, when you're someplace, you have an instinct of where you should be, and if something doesn't feel right, it is because you've, exactly like you've described, you've looked at this map, you have an idea of what the terrain should be like.
Right.
So then you're looking at the map and trying to reorient yourself
is
and
this lining up or
realizing,
not?
like, so
Right.
yeah, I mean, maps are absolutely critical for that.
Well, and we used them recently, the trip I did up in the Scotty Mountains 2 weekends ago, the north-facing slopes were just, completely coated in snow. And so, we were doing this east-west traverse for a while and just in all of the snow. And we're like, all right, where are we going to have lunch? Let's see where the trail starts turning north again. And then let's look for a relatively flat spot. And then we're like, all right, cool. We found a sunny southern-facing slope, and we knew exactly how far ahead it was, and we were paying attention to the bends and the curves in the trail. And, so sometimes, too, it's like, okay, we just have to go around that bend and then
in the sun again.
in the sun, theoretically.
So let's talk itinerary. So you like to read everything you can about it before. You like to get your maps. You like to look through your maps. How do you figure out what your itinerary is going to be, and how flexible are you with that itinerary?
I think you have to have 100% flexibility to some degree because you're dealing with so many things that are out of your control. Things like weather, maybe there's a creek that you can't cross and you need to go upstream or downstream, backtrack or whatnot. I completely lost my train of thought.
No, but I think that
The ghost of
I know
messing with
the
your
ghost
mind.
had just ate my brain.
Ghost of Sand Narrow Trail, Ghost of Palm State. Yeah, I think that. Wait, ask the question again.
I know. Seriously, what's the question?
So the question is about making your itinerary
Yes,
ahead
okay.
of time,
Okay.
and
Yeah,
then how
so here's an
flexible you are
example.
with that itinerary.
I mean, I agree with Pamela. I think you need to be 100% flexible. This summer I went out for a resupply over Kearsarge Pass and came back into the beginning of this insane stream of monsoonal weather, basically. And my original itinerary was I had my fishing pole with me. I had picked it up in Lone Pine. I was pretty psyched to go relax at Ray Lakes. And so I was going to get up early the next morning, push over Kearsarge, and go over Glen Pass all in the same day, which is a pretty beefy day, but it gets you, and it's short mileage, but
it's
definitely a
doable
lot
when you've been
up.
out on the trail
Yeah,
for
your
a long
legs
time. So
are
at that
ready, your
point,
lungs
you
are
know,
ready.
it's something you can absolutely do.
But I had a backup plan, and I was like, all right, if the weather gets gnarly, I can go to Charlotte Lake. There's the bear box there. I can hang out
Ranger
there.
station.
The ranger. I ended up talking to the ranger for like an hour. So that's what I did. I was like, all right, well, so what? It's raining. Here's my plan B. And I think that's really key. And there was another night where I was going to go. I wanted to get a lot closer to Pinchot Pass. And it was after the bear incident. And I met this woman who had also been hopping back and forth. We've been kind of like leapfrogging each other on the trail. And we ended up chatting over lunch. She's like, well, how far are you going? I'm like, I don't know. I might go a couple more miles. Then these two guys walk up. We end up chatting with them. And I was like, you know what? I'm going to hang here tonight. We can have a campfire at this campsite. I'm going to go fishing. It's going to be awesome. And it was. And it was so worth it. I mean, the next day was long. It was a long slog. But
It's true,
great
though, because
memories.
you
Yeah.
have to have this
Yeah, great
flexibility.
memories
Because, there were points on the trail where I got to where my destination was, but I had such great energy that I was like, like, I'm going to keep walking. Like,
Yep.
let me
Yeah.
look at my map. And,
that.
there's
you can
another
listen to your
lake in
body.
5 miles, and I can easily make that. And there was one, day where I got to a lake, and even though I had the energy, it was such a beautiful place for me. It was like 1 PM. I'm like, I'm going to set up camp and I'm going to fish. And, it was like the greatest choice for me. So I think, allowing that flexibility and not being so rigid on like, you have to do these miles. And a lot of people, I think, conditioning is a huge part of getting out on the trail. But, doing 15 miles in, an Eastern Sierras type of terrain is very different than doing 15 miles in a rolling hill desert or 15 miles, relatively flat. Like, 15 miles can be really tough or a much easygoing. So, having that flexibility to know, what's a realistic time frame for you versus doing, I met a group of people that were planning when I was on the JMT. They had come to one of my talks, and so we had, spoken for a while, and their itinerary was doing something like 22-mile days, and they were doing it in a really, really short period of time. And, they weren't from Southern California. So while they were conditioning, weren't conditioning, doing these high elevation and all of that. So they didn't succeed because they just weren't prepared they had an idea that wasn't realistic for what their capabilities were. And, you kind of want to build into a long through hike or a really long solo hike, because you'll start off and your body will get stronger. Your pack will, your pack will feel lighter, and you'll just be mentally and physically stronger over time. So, having that window of flexibility in your schedule, I think, is incredibly important.
One of the things I think you're kind of saying that you haven't outright said is that flexibility is almost like a gift to yourself.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
That's the best thing. I mean, that's going back to the whole point sometimes, like we were talking about in the beginning of doing solo travel. I mean, you might have friends, like I can go backpacking with Pamela, and it's like going solo backpacking because we both have the same mindset.
Because we never talk to each other on the trail.
Because we don't look at each other. We're actually 10 miles apart.
We just commute there, look at each other.
We actually go on separate days.
Exactly.
But it's because we have the same mindset. We both go out there with that spirit of adventure. Like, we have an end goal. We know by this day we want to be back in the car roughly around this time. But if we stop somewhere and say, man, this is pretty cool, we're probably both down with it. Or worst comes to worst, I'll be like, you go where you want, I'm going to go where I want. We'll meet here tomorrow for lunch.
And we also always keep each other in sight, even if we're 2 or 3 turns away from each other. Like, whoever's leading, like, we'll stop and just be like, okay, I can see you. Which I think is really, really important. Like, you don't want to be so far from the person you're hiking with because anything can go wrong really quickly, But at the same time, we do kind of hike our own hike, but then there are times where we're just so connected on the trail and we're singing and talking and we're just immersed in conversation and, and then we'll go back to kind of hiking our own hike.
Yeah, we're very good solo duo backpackers.
Yeah, seriously. I'm like, you are honestly my favorite person to solo duo backpack with.
But yeah, I think that there's that. I don't know. I like that. I mean, come on, why'd you go to Newfoundland by yourself?
I love traveling by myself. There's a lot of like freedom that you don't get necessarily from being with somebody, and it's such an amazing experience. You connect with so many just random people.
Oh, yeah.
You meet the nicest people and just have such great connections, and people I'm still friends with. And I want to go back there and finish that trek and hook up with these people again. And it's just
yeah, that's right, because you're a quitter. You're a failure. You
Oh, you're so rough on Alden. Oh my
I'm gonna act like I'm all offended.
Really, he's smiling.
You get a similar thing on the trail when you're by yourself. It's just so freeing. You can do whatever you want. It's like the ultimate freedom.
That is so
But that,
true.
and that comes from being prepared, though, too.
Yeah.
Is that when you give yourself the gift of preparedness and like teaching
The
yourself how to
map,
do
you can
this
read,
stuff,
you know where to go.
Then you have that is the ultimate freedom. You're like, I can do
Yeah.
this. I know how to do this. I'm gonna go do what I want today, and it's awesome, And yeah, I love that feeling. That's that feeling of just being. You're like one with wherever you are. I feel like a little kid sometimes when I'm out in the desert, out in the mountains, whatever, by myself, and just I smile and like sometimes I'll like talk to myself and sing and dance and who knows?
Confession, we all do that a lot.
Yes,
so I'm
okay, you guys
always
are weird. I don't do
singing
that at
and
all.
talking.
Totally do that.
So when I was on the JMT, I was always going off and doing these peaks on the sides or going to visit some lake or something, and that's how I got my trail name, Side Trip.
Nice. That's awesome. Great trail name.
And I was just constantly just going off.
Wait, I thought it was Sweet Buns.
Well, that's just between me and you.
Oh, sorry, I got confused.
That's your trail name for him.
That's a private trail name, man. So, I was just always going and exploring these areas. And when you're by yourself, you have the freedom to do that. And you're not like, I'm too tired today, so I'll fish at Ray Lakes and catch 18 trout, which is...
But you know what, though? But I actually did, like, the one day where I stopped much earlier than I'd planned. And, I did catch a lot of trout, but then I also cooked it and gave it to everyone that was there at camp. That
yes, I
filtered
cooked it as
in
part
later.
Of a group,
so that was sort of like,
as part of a
hey, I
group,
just
yeah.
made this trout, because
Totally.
you catch one and you're like, let me get one more. And then that second one is like giant, so then you're like, oh, okay. And... so yeah, I think that's kind of the fun of it too.
Yeah.
When you have those down days or rest days or unexpected early days.
So at some point, there has to be a last day. It's the day that you,
just
you
gonna
get
say.
off of the trail.
Oh, and
So
that is
last day
that's
story.
the hardest. That's the hardest day of all, honestly.
I remember coming up to Tuolumne Meadows, and it's funny, that day I was in a really weird mind space, of course. I'd been on the trail for like 2 months. I ran into these guys earlier in the day, this group of 50-somethings. They were Boy Scouts together when they were kids, and they decided to do this annual camping trip. And they just started, this was their first annual camping trip, by the way, so we'll see if they do it next year. But they saw
First annual is always a great
annual camping trip.
We don't know if it's going to happen again.
But definitely happened this year. And they were chatting with me, but I was in this weird space where I was like, you know what, I need to finish. And I told them, I said, you know what, guys, I'm going to catch up with you at the general store for a beer, but I need to finish this by myself. And they were really cool about it. And I remember walking up, and the thing is, especially ending there, so you walk up, you've been in the wilderness and these amazing places, and all of a sudden it's like you see cars, and there's a road, and then there's all these tourists, and they're all clean, and they all smell good, and all of a sudden it's just like...
And then you smell so bad.
Oh, so many people. I actually had to walk back a little bit into the trees and sit down and kind of collect myself because I started sort of losing it. I was like, I'm not ready for this yet.
Yeah.
It was pretty funny, though, because when I walked back out of the
funny
trees...
thing is you were leaving the wilderness for the true, like, social wilderness.
Yeah, right?
Yeah, seriously.
And there was something to be said for, like, readjusting to being a social human, because I walk out when I decided to go, like, pop back out of the trees and finish my hike and go to the general store and get my beer. These two kind of bros were walking towards me, and they had on board shorts and tank tops, and they were like, hey, I was like, are you okay? I'm like, yeah, I'm cool. I just got out the BCC. I just been up. And they're like, do you want a hug? I'm like, yeah. I got a really awesome hug, but only from one of them.
Aw.
Did you get his number?
I didn't. Yeah, he's like, that's why the other one wouldn't hug me.
Dude, you smell like my other friend.
Too weird.
Well, I did have my tears of joy coming off the John Muir Trail. I actually ended my hike on my birthday.
So
it
did
was,
I.
Yeah.
I did the same thing.
Yes.
All three of us.
29.
Nice. Awesome.
We're having birthday high fives.
So I had 3 friends that actually hiked and met me. We met up at trail camp on the other side, and then my goal was for my birthday was to actually hike up in the dark and watch the sunrise. So the 3 of us, I'd hiked up and over Trail Crest, met them at trail camp, and then we hiked up in the morning, really, really early in the morning. I was going a little bit faster than they were, and I got there, and it was, having them with me and sharing that experience, and I mean, it was something that was just so emotional. And then you have all of the other, JMT finishers that are coming up, and, just to have the few people that you've met on the trail and seen for the last few days. I actually sat for a little while. I, brought my stove so I could make some hot coffee for everybody, and, I had that moment where, after the sun had risen and, my friends hiked down because they were going much slower than me at this point because I was, completely
Buns of steel.
I know, buns of steel, completely acclimated, like, running up to Mount Whitney. And, you have that moment, and it was so hard for me hiking back that I was literally just like, I am not ready to be in society.
I did
yet.
not know how to people when I got off
I
the trail.
I didn't know how to people either. And I got home and I was so happy to see my dogs because I hadn't seen my dogs in a month. And, and my birthday was on a Friday, so I got home on a Saturday. I stayed up in Lone Pine for a night, got home Saturday afternoon. I was home maybe 3 hours, had done laundry, and I grabbed the dogs. It was a 3-day weekend because my birthday usually falls at the 3-day weekend at the end of the summer. And I took my dogs and we went went backpacking for like
So
another
funny.
2-day trip. I was just like, I'm not ready right now to be
I
home.
did the same thing.
It was just
Great.
too overwhelming for me. And I would have probably had taken another week had I
Right.
had the time.
The perils of solo backpacking.
Yeah,
I did the same thing though, where I had my friends meet me, and it was my birthday too, because we're awesome, because we do that.
That's so perfect.
But yeah, and for me, it was really cool to share everything with them. But then when I came back to LA is when it really hit me, and
Yeah.
it was like too many people,
Yeah,
so many
LA.
people.
But
Like
also-
just hanging with my friends was
Juxtaposition.
cool, but then it was like, whoa.
Yeah,
And I ran back up there too.
I think the hardest thing though is people are curious, like they ask, but the way that you want to tell them about your story, you want to go so deep into
Yes.
these poignant moments for you, and they're they just want the cliff notes on your trip. How was it? Just give me the highlights. They want like a 3 to 5
Yeah, and
minute.
you're like, do you have 5 hours?
And you're ready to like totally grab them on the shoulder, look them square in the eye, and connect with them as deeply as you connected with the wilderness.
Yeah.
And they're not ready to do
You
that.
want to show them your 400 slide presentation?
Seriously, so
29 cat holes.
it's 29 cat holes. So it's coming off the trail I think is something you have to prepare for too, because it's such a different experience. Like
Especially when you're solo and you have to reintegrate.
yeah, reintegrating is it's a really, really tough thing. I mean, I think every weekend after that I was in the Sierras.
Yep, I did that too.
I
That's
was
so
just like,
funny.
I need to take another 3-day trip here, another 4-day trip there, and it was almost like I felt like I had a dual life. Like I had done this experience and it felt so very surreal and very like it didn't happen. Like I had that experience, but no one else had that experience.
Yeah,
Yes.
I've
And-
had.
yes.
Yeah, no one can relate.
Yeah, so I would go to work
Yeah.
and it was just like, wow, I just had this amazing experience, but I was in this work bubble. And then on my weekends again, I'd be like immersed again back into
Yeah.
nature, where I felt like these are my mountains and I'm here again. And I'd come back to work, and it was such a weird thing. I think I was very fortunate that I was able to give several talks at various REIs about my John Muir Trail trip, and it was prepping for all of those talks and
Yeah.
going through my slides, and I put together a video, a little documentary that's about 15 minutes that kind of talks about my experience on the trail. I mean, that was very, very therapeutic for me. That really helped me kind of put it all together, because it just seemed so unreachable when I got home to share this experience that you can't really share with only such a few group of people that have done this. And people truly are interested, but if it's not what they're doing, they just don't get the depth of what you just had experienced.
Right. You have to almost think of maybe a comparable situation they would be in that they could maybe use as an analogy to try to identify with what you're trying to
but
explain
even
to them.
that's just so hard to
Where
do.
you just hang out with other solo hikers and talk
Exactly.
about your
I
experience.
know, so I love all my other friends, and you are awesome, and thank you for the Christmas cards and the casual emails and text messages.
are great.
But I am here with my people now,
The tribe.
the tribe.
So it was. I did the JMT, the John Muir Trail. For those that don't remember all the acronyms from the beginning.
From 2 hours ago.
They'll be listed at the cliff notes.
Yeah, I'll provide a dictionary in the show notes.
So I did it in September. My birthday's September 30th, and I summited and actually slept on top.
Oh, that's beautiful.
Yeah, and I had set up I was going to set up my tent in they have those little like kind of windbreaks.
Mm-hmm.
Someone had taken a dump.
Happy birthday to you!
29
Here's
cat
your
holes.
gift.
Exactly. No, that
the
was
30
mine.
of cat
30
hole.
of-
There was no cat hole. So it
And
was
then-
just 29 cat holes.
And there was like teepee on top. And then there was like, and I think another one, there was a wag bag. People do that on Whitney. I don't understand. They put in the wag bag and then they just put it in
Carry
these,
it out with you.
I know.
and then
that's
the
a leave no
ranger
trace
comes up.
ethic.
Oh yeah. Anyway, so I did set up my tent in one that was poop free, and
At least you hope.
but some other guys had come up and they were sleeping in the hut, and it was probably in the single digits that night with the wind chill and everything, maybe even colder. They convinced me essentially just to come into the hut. I was like, okay. And I got in there, and we were all pretty crammed in, so it was like full of people. It was probably 48 degrees in there, just from the body heat. I saw the sunset, beautiful sunset, moonrise, full moon over, what was it, trail camp down there? And you can like see, people coming and stuff. And then the sunrise. And then this guy hiked up, and he had a a flask of martinis with olives and a glass.
Oh, wow.
And I told him it was my birthday, and I had like 3 of these martinis.
Great idea. 14.
Yeah.
Oh my!
That
And
coffee actually really did have whiskey in it, by the way, for that sunrise. We just didn't
like now that
mention
everything's on the table.
Exactly.
And I didn't drink coffee at the time, and someone made me coffee there. So I was just like flying high, I was like dancing on the way back down.
It's my birthday. I'm a Whitney.
So it was pretty amazing seeing all those things, and just the experience, and everyone was so, amazing and nice, and just, being up there for the sunset and sunrise and moon and all that, and then coming back into down to Whitney Portal. It's funny, as you get closer, you start noticing like the fresh perfumes, and then I start noticing my stench.
Yes.
And I'm like, oh my God. And you hold your arms a little closer to your
Yes.
body, and kind of like,
You're like, I want to hug you, but I can't do that.
T-Rex arms all of a sudden.
yeah, the T-Rex hug.
You reach for the beer that they're getting you when you get down to Whitney Portal, and you're like, just set it down. I'll lean
Totally.
into it.
The best is when you because this happened to me specifically on that trail where we were getting rained on for 4 days, where on one of the days, like, I'd reach up to do something, and then I'd be like, man, what is that smell? That smell is terrible. And then I would
That's
realize,
Jason in your
oh
face.
man, that's me. I smell so bad that I'm offending myself.
Yeah, that's actually really scary.
But
That's
you
when I
get
know I need
used
to
to
boil
it.
my clothes and wash
Yeah,
them.
you do. You get
And
used
then
to
you
it.
smell other people, I'm like, wow. And then that juxtaposition of the extremely, sweet smelling.
God, these perfume people fucking stink.
What is that, Old Spice?
And I have a feeling like every person I walk by is probably gagging.
Yes.
I picked up a PCT hiker once at Whitney or one of these trailheads and drove him down into town, and I had to roll the windows down. Like, the smell was so bad.
I was actually shocked once. The very first time I hitchhiked solo, I was up at Horseshoe Meadows trying to get a ride down and to do a resupply. And it was like 6:30 on a Friday night, and no one's going to pick me up, right? Everyone's going into the mountains, not out of them. But I see this gold Lexus SUV start driving towards me. I'm like, yes.
And you're like
The mother
flagging.
And then I'm like, oh, crap. So I take off one shirt. I put on my pajama shirt because I figured it was the least stinky.
You had
And
only
they
been
roll up.
sleeping in
Oh
it,
my-
not
yeah,
walking
right.
in it.
And they're like, hello, do you need a ride?
Do you
I'm
stick
like,
your thumb out? And-
Yeah, I did the whole 9
Okay,
yards.
yeah.
I was like smiling as big as I could smile. I was pouring on all the charm, and they picked me up. And I was absolutely stunned that they didn't open any of the windows. I was gagging on my own smell. And I was
Oh,
just
wow. Maybe
sitting
they were
there
trying
like,
to
They were being
polite or
really,
something.
really
yes.
polite.
I was like, really? Or their noses were broken?
They probably never picked up another
I know.
hiker
You're like,
after
this
that.
is the first time we've picked up a
Ruined it for
PCT hiker. Yeah, first and last.
They should have like a complimentary like cologne station at the
Yeah,
trailhead.
seriously.
Yep.
Or just somebody with a water hose spray you down as you come out.
Oh, you need like
It's
3
a hazmat
washings, dude,
team.
with soap.
Just
Just a
step,
bubble.
step through
Step
the
inside this
hazmat.
bubble and then get in my car.
When you plan out your final day, how true do you stay to it? And what kind of leeway do you give yourself for when you can actually complete the trip?
For me, because I was dealing with 3 friends that we had permits to come into the Whitney zone to Summit Mount Whitney, I was absolutely 100% on to that schedule. If I could have extended it, I would have. I would have just been like,
We'd
okay.
still be hiking
I know,
now.
we'd still be, seriously, I'd still be hiking. I would have, yeah. But, I think it all just depends,
Yeah, it depends.
I mean, they
Like-
were my ride down too, so,
Yeah, you kinda
as
wanna
much as I
catch that
wanted to
ride.
stay, I still kind of, needed to get home.
I almost told my
Leave.
friends to leave me though after they came. I was like, maybe you guys could just leave me. I'm still off work for a little
I
while.
was-
And they're like, as soon as
seriously-
we smelled you, we thought about it.
Yeah, I was ready to yo-yo the trail and just head back. I'm like,
Right.
I can figure this out. I know all the exits. I can get off and I can do my own resupply. I was like so ready to do that.
Yeah, I had to plan mine too. I mean, I wanted just like all of us, fancy people finishing on our birthdays. But yeah, I had friends meeting me too. But I also I put a little flexibility in there because they couldn't come meet me on my birthday. I had one friend that drove up. Another one was supposed to, and then she had to work. So it was all kind of like flexible within a few days. So I did actually think about spending an extra night on the trail, but I went into Tuolumne and got to hang out with some cool people. I hung out with the 50-year-old Boy Scouts got me they paid for a group campsite. That was the only site that was left in Tuolumne, and that's like a $50 campsite. And they paid for it between all of them. And then they bought me astronaut ice cream and wine at the Tuolumne General Store. And then I got really drunk, and it was awesome. I liked it.
You're like really drunk on my birthday. And astronaut ice cream.
It was astronaut ice cream was the jam.
It's a trip because I actually had my friend's pack mule one in for us to share too.
Nice.
It's so
Here's
weird.
a little story about astronaut ice cream. So I went to space camp when I was a kid.
Lucky. I love that movie.
Is so cool.
And by the way, for anyone asking, yes, we went into space on the space shuttle, and yes, we went into the anti-gravity room. Those are questions always people ask, and it's like, number one, the anti-gravity room doesn't exist. Number two, of course, they don't send children into space, and that would cost millions of dollars.
But they should anyway, and you should have just told them, yes, I did do
Yeah,
that.
I always just say, oh, yeah, of course. But at the end of every day at space camp, half of the kids would go across to the store and buy astronaut ice cream. So we had astronaut ice cream like
It's
every
actually
day.
really good. It's a freeze-dried ice cream sandwich. And it's dry, so you take a bite and you sort of just let it come to life in your saliva, and it tastes
You just made that sound super appetizing.
No, but it honestly tastes
Moist.
really
And then it
good.
comes to life in your
No, I know what you
saliva.
mean. You don't taste it till after it's in your mouth.
Yeah,
Well, it has to
after
reform
'cause,
into
yeah,
ice
it has to
cream,
kind
yeah.
of reform into ice cream, but it's really, really good, and you can buy it online in packs of 24. And I don't know how many I have
people
left
know
in my
about
closet.
astronaut ice cream.
Well, and the ones we had are the Neapolitan. So
Oh,
we
yeah,
didn't
the
have
Neapolitan is what you
the
have to
ice cream
get.
sandwiches.
Yeah, no, I had the ice cream sandwich.
So, dude, when you were doing JMT and Newfoundland and all that, your end date, was it set in stone?
So the JMT, I think I had 1 or 2 days of flexibility, but I really did want to be on top of Whitney on my birthday, so that worked out. For Newfoundland, I had a 7-day permit, which I, went over by a day, and that's when the helicopter came out. But that was the first day I could get out. I had a month up there, so I definitely had huge flexibility. I was just kind of going wherever I would go. And that was just an amazing experience. So I did another backpacking trip after that one, just for a few nights on the east coast of Newfoundland, and that was a lot more civilized. And actually, someone I met from couch surfing joined me, so it does not qualify to speak further on this podcast because it was not so. So it definitely had flexibility in most cases.
So I think we'll go into our final 2 talking points now. So maybe we'll make an even 2 hours in the end.
Okay.
Just to keep you guys
Nice.
really interested.
All right, so this is probably the last big talking point, and then I want to follow up with one more thing after this. Skills. So a certain number of skills are necessary or recommended. So what skills would you choose as like the essential skills people need to have to solo backpack, and then good to haves?
Conditioning, I think, is super, super important because you can know how to set up your tent, you can know how to use your stove, you can know how to read a map, you can know how to navigate, but if you can't walk more than a few miles on the trail, it's going to take you a really long time and you're going to have a very, very miserable time. So I would say, get out there. I spent from January, the year that I did the JMT, I did it in August. I got on the trail every single day and I was hiking, at least 6 miles. The first few weeks was without a pack. The, following after that, I had a pack and, I had it, lightly filled, and I just kept increasing my weight and kept increasing my distance. And, I wanted to make sure that I was really, really strong, because when you're starting on any trail, it's your first day, you have your maximum weight. And as enthusiastic as you are, it still takes you a little while to kind of really get your footing and, really kind of get your legs and, get your pace on the trail. So without that conditioning, I think it's going to be a much more challenging time for you to successfully finish a through hike.
I think the biggest skill, in my opinion, is learning to be comfortable being by yourself. And it's one of the things you see a lot if you follow any of the online forums for the JMT or the PCT, is a lot of people say, like, I've never camped by myself. And so that's one aspect of it, is go out, camp by yourself and see what you think. And for some people that means, camping in your backyard and then maybe progressing somewhere local. And some people find it's not for them. And it's probably good to know that before you decide to do like a 2-week trail or something like that. But the other end of that is being aware maybe if there's any things that you have been ruminating on, because a lot of people do enter a solo trip with things on their mind. And you have to be comfortable with that stuff coming up and maybe getting ugly, and maybe, it's just you and your thoughts a lot of the times. And so you have to be okay with that. So I think that's part of it. And then I think, I'd go back as far as a skill that would be great to have, as I would just say, once again, learn how to use and love a map.
Yeah. Use and love a map. I would
honestly.
Yeah, definitely. I would absolutely say that. And conditioning, and I think any of those talking points, what Shawnte said, if you're not comfortable with being alone, it can be really trying, really challenging. I met people that were not in a good space when they walked on the trail and they had a hard time where, I had kind of talked about the fact that I was in an amazing headspace. So even the hardest times were still not as bad as they could have been had I not been in a great headspace.
It may sound cliche, but like having a positive attitude can change a lot of crappy situations into
always look on the bright
side of life. And that's, people say that all the time, but even
Keep on the sunny side.
Always on the sunny side.
What is that from?
Dude, it's Sunny Side of Life.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, you just inspired everybody to sing, Alden.
Wow.
It might sound
We're
cliche,
ready
but
to
it
go walk
inspired
off
us all
in
to
4
sing.
different directions singing our own tune right
That
now.
happens with Jason a lot. He breaks out. We call him J-Pod.
That is true, though.
I like to call myself
Alden,
Kenya
honestly,
Jukebox.
I will agree with
Yeah.
that point. Like, you really, even in the hardest times, if you
Even
just
if you're hurt
take a
or-
breath
yeah.
and look around you and realize, like, where you are and how lucky and privileged you are and blessed you are to be where you are, it can immediately change your mindset and get you to where you can continue to summit and get up and over that pass, or, move a little while longer in the rain because you need to make that 8 miles today for a food resupply or whatever, it is on the trails that might be, kind of causing a hard day.
Yeah, I don't remember which episode it was, but I've had this exact same conversation about having a positive attitude, because you basically put yourself in a situation where you can't control the environment, you can't control the outcome. So you either can accept that this situation is what it is and deal with it as best you can, or you can get upset and emotional and make the situation worse.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, so much of life is how you react to things.
Yeah.
So.
They've even had in survival situations, they've had people that have lived longer without whatever, food, water, whatever the case is, and they attribute a lot of it to, the person keeping a positive attitude and like, I want to survive.
Yeah.
So then they do.
Yeah, they
and
don't
it just
give
like
up.
kind of goes
Yeah.
against,
Yeah.
what the body needs to survive. So I think that is
Yeah,
a key.
willpower.
Yeah,
Yeah,
just
yeah.
kind of pushing through.
Yeah.
So, obviously everyone else said a lot of good topics, but that was my little thing I wanted to add. And map reading. And maps. Cal Topo.
I know.
Maps.
Maps.
I can spend hours looking at Cal Topo.
Oh, God,
and
me
it's
too.
like,
Sometimes I'm
yeah.
like, oh, my God, it's been 12 hours and I still haven't picked my map yet because I'm trying to figure out, like...
And so just a quick plug for Cal Topo. It's the most amazing thing. It's free, although there is a paying subscription you can get if you want to make private KMLs, like private routes.
Mm-hmm.
I highly recommend even just paying something for it, because this guy does it. It's not his main job. He kind of does it for people like us.
Yeah. Thanks, dude.
Yeah. Oh, it's super awesome.
Appreciate it.
So it's called Cal Topo. So does that mean it's only topo maps
No,
for
I'm
California?
not sure why it's CALTOPO.com.
But you can get them for anywhere in the States, I think.
Yeah. It's all over the U.S. It's the USGS. It's the U.S. Forest Raster. It's Google Maps, satellite imagery, anything you can think of. It has forest fire information. It has cycle maps, so up-to-date trails, like historic USGS maps, and they're all aligned, and they're all aligned
Yeah, you can
properly. So
overlay
they're
them all.
overlaid.
It's really nice.
It's just it's such an amazing resource, and it's this one dude who like built this whole site, and so many people use it, and I think you should definitely support that site, so it's there for the future.
Awesome. No, I wish you could see Alden's face. Like, his eyes are shining.
There's a sparkle.
He's smiling. Like, you can see his teeth in the dark. His hands are waving in the air. I mean, he's so enthusiastic.
I was trying to think of what song we could all break into after that, and the only thing that came to mind was "The children are our future. Teach them well and let them lead the way.
J-Pod, pause.
Show them all the beauty they possess." I wonder if I'm going to get sued because I don't have the rights for the performance rights for these songs.
I think it just needs to be under
Well,
20 seconds.
that's what I was just going to say. If it's under 20 seconds, you're
We're
good.
fine, guys. We're fine.
So this will now bring us to our final topic for the night, and then everybody can
Go pee in the
go
woods.
run away alone and
Take
urinate
cat
in the
hole 30.
woods.
Yeah.
Cat hole 30.
Yeah, hopefully we won't all get murdered by ghosts while we're separated urinating.
End scene.
So for this
End scene.
for this final topic, There are probably people listening who have thought about solo backpacking and like, I don't know if it's for me. Maybe it's too scary. I don't know. Maybe I should give it a try. So people that are on the fence trying to figure out if they should give it a try, what would you recommend they do?
One night.
Yeah.
One night somewhere that's familiar to you.
Yeah.
Go to
not too far.
Yeah, not too far. Go somewhere that you already like, that you've seen during the daylight, and try it out and have a bail plan if you get too freaked out. But yeah, try one night. Don't bite off like a week-long excursion. Don't go in a crazy rainstorm or something. Make it pleasant. Maybe bring something, like bring earplugs, bring a book.
Do you guys
something
ever
to
bring?
distract you.
I never have on a trip that I can remember, but I've thought about it. Bring like music or an audiobook
No,
or anything.
I just brought a
I've
journal
never-
and I
read
brought
books.
cards.
Yeah, okay.
I do read
No.
books.
I've heard other people say that. I think Jason, you've mentioned that maybe.
Yeah, well, and full disclosure, I've never done a solo backpack. I've only done solo hiking, but it's my podcast, so I can be on any roundtable I want.
Yeah, you should probably
Because
go
I'm the
now.
MC, man.
You're like, so when someone emailed in and all of these questions, they were
I did not
actually
think of
mine.
myself.
Yeah, so that
That
someone
was
was
me.
me. Yeah.
Typical. My friend wants to know.
Yeah,
Yeah,
exactly.
No, but I have solo hiking taken like a phone with me and listen to podcasts or music and things like that.
As
And-
long as
that
it's the
does
Go
help
Get
some
Outside
people.
podcast.
I've already heard all those like 20 times while I edit them. So
They're all right.
I mean, everyone should download and listen to these as often
So
as
boring.
possible.
No, they're actually, the series is really, really phenomenal. You do
All
a
right, we don't-
fantastic job.
I appreciate it, but we don't need to turn this into a weird advertisement for me. We already
That's
made a
already
Caltopo advertisement.
listening. Yeah.
But if you're not subscribed and you haven't rated and reviewed this yet,
You
all you have to
absolutely
do is
should.
go straight over to iTunes or Stitcher.
Caltopo.com.
Wilderness Travel Course, The 30th Cat Hole by Pamela.
So that's everybody's advice then, huh? Find a place you're familiar with, go
Yeah.
one night, give it a try.
Yeah.
And I
And
would
be
also
ready to
say,
run
don't
away
let
if you're
your the one thing I found that to be really true throughout my life, because I always push myself to do things out of my comfort zone, is it's so rewarding.
Yeah.
And don't let someone else who, because that's something they're not going to do, don't let them
Yes.
talk you out of doing something you want to do.
Don't listen to the naysayers.
Yeah, don't listen to the naysayers, because
Listen to
everybody
us.
has their own fears, and if you're breaking the boundary that they will never cross, they're going to try to talk you out of it because they're so it's
'Cause they're
something
freaked out.
because
Yeah.
it's something they're not going to do, and don't listen to them.
Well,
Follow
That's great
your
advice,
heart and
yeah.
follow what you want to do.
So much of fear is based in ignorance, and not ignorance as in stupidity,
No,
but just ignorance as a
in
lack of knowledge.
yeah.
Right. And so people who haven't maybe gone solo backpacking or backpacking at all, they're ignorant. They don't have a true understanding of
Because they
what
just
is
see
involved.
the glorified bear attack, and this person
Right.
did this, and like the word, they just hear the news.
Solo
and
hiker
the worst.
dies, gets
Yeah.
lost. It's
Yeah.
like one out of how
Yeah,
many?
out
Yeah,
of
maybe they should
thousands.
listen to this podcast.
Exactly.
I'm trying to get it to them. I'm trying to get it out there.
Caltopo.com.
It's Topo, by the way.
Oh!
Topographical. it's
Show them
both.
all the beauty they possess.
I'm going to say nothing.
So I think we've pretty much hit everything that there is to talk about. Is anyone just have something inside that just needs to come out?
Just get out there, man.
Yeah, just
you know?
get out there.
Get
However
outside.
yeah.
Find something that calls to you. And if you find that solo backpacking isn't your jam, that's okay. If you do any of the
Yeah.
big trails like the JMT, the PCT, the AT, you're going to meet other people on the trail. You can start out solo, and I guarantee, unless you're starting at a weird time of year, if you go down to the southern terminus of the PCT, you will be hiking with people and camping with them every day. You have to make a concerted effort not to. So, don't let that dissuade you. If you find that you're not really into like being in the woods by yourself, go for it. Talk to people on the forums. You'll make sort of like internet friends that way, and you'll meet them on the trail, and you might hate them, but you might also really enjoy spending time with them. So have an open mind.
I would agree with that. Definitely always have an open mind, because when you're open to all of this amazing stuff, then amazing things happen, and you have stories of a lifetime, and it's really life-changing, and it'll just make you a very different, aware person.
In all areas of your life,
Yeah.
you can take the lessons you learn on the trail, especially as a solo backpacker, and apply them in other places for sure.
Yeah, I think when you push your comfort zone a little bit, you go slightly outside of your comfort zone, you
that's where the magic happens.
that where
I
life
agree.
begins?
That is where the
Yeah.
magic happens. You know, I think everyone gets too caught up in like their routine. It's like
Yeah.
break that routine and go do something you never thought you were going to do. And I tell you, wow.
That's the
you know?
zest
Yeah.
of life.
It is the
That's-
zest
yeah.
of life.
The
To me,
zest
that's
of life.
I think you're looking at 4 people here that always push their comfort
Super
zone. And,
zesty.
Seasoned,
if you will.
Yeah.
Like your shirt.
Just like my shirt. Super Old Spice.
So it sounds like, if we want to sum everything up, because that's what I'm supposed to do, the one thing, if you only take one thing away from this 2-hour podcast, if you somehow,
and you weren't listening.
if you just really haven't been paying attention till right now, the takeaway is do not let fear stifle your life.
Hell yes.
Yeah, absolutely. Go and live. Like, just have the most incredible life. Do things you never thought you were going to do.
And then stop by caltopo.com.
I didn't want to give it another plug.
Thank you for doing that.
I hope he's going to give you some
Yeah, is there
sort
kickbacks
of,
happening
Yeah,
here?
some sort of kickback.
He
Some
probably makes
payola.
Nothing off of it.
Yeah.
0.0 dollars.
Hey, he's like, I'll give you some of the negative money that it's cost me.
You actually owe him money now.
And on that note, did we want to go out singing a song? Anybody got something they want?
Oh, God.
Happy trails to you
Until we
meet again.
I hope everyone enjoyed our first Roundtable episode. Do expect more in the future. I would like to thank all 3 of our guests for being on the show. We recorded this 5 months ago, so a lot of time has passed. Since we all sat down and spoke, Alden isn't even in this country anymore. He's traipsing around Europe for 6 months with his girlfriend. Shawnte is running around writing her book and playing around on trails. And Pamela is hanging out with a bunch of llamas. If you're curious about that, now's a great time to go to the website, gogetoutside.com/podcast. Head over to episode 31, Roundtable Solo Backpacking, and there you will find all the things you usually find, photographs, lots of pictures of various things, maybe even some pictures of llamas, and links galore. We talked about a lot of things in this episode, everything from books to essays to lots of gear, and even, of course, Caltopos. So if you head over to the website, there will be links to that, and there will be links to the Instagram account for Pamela and all her llamas. So if you'd like to know what a person could be doing with multiple llamas on a trail, you should head to the website and find out. gogetoutside.com/podcast. And you know what time it will be after that. After you've run over to the website, you'll already be on the internet, so you may as well send us an email. go@butcherbirdstudios.com. Let us know if you like this episode and how much you appreciate Stephen Abbott requesting we discuss this topic. You could also call us up. You could leave us a message. You could call 818-925-0106 if you are not in this country. Like Alden Anderson, then you should place a 1 before that number as you dial it. That would be 1-818-925-0106. You can leave us a 3-minute voicemail as many times as you would like. And now is when I request that you do us a big favor here at the show. Please head over to iTunes, Stitcher, Google Play, whatever you use to listen to this. There are so many I can't keep up with them. But please head over to that place, whatever it may be, and make sure you are subscribed to the show, and then rate and review the show. I would greatly appreciate it. Butcherbird Studios would greatly appreciate it. The Go Get Outside podcast would greatly appreciate it. And all future listeners who will find out about the show because you have rated and reviewed it will appreciate it. Next time on the show, we will sit down with my passionate Italian friend, Luca Carabini, and he will tell us all about his globe-trotting adventures as a caver, canyoneer, search and rescue team member, and consummate adventurer. Come back July 1st to Luca Carabini. See you then.